Test. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the stream. We got Guido1212 and Slick1212. Slick's the one in the middle, and Guido's over there on the far side. Both of these guys flew the F-15C in the USAF, so they've been kind enough to come here today and answer some questions from you guys. And we got a bunch of stuff to get through, so it's going to be a super interesting stream. Alright, so we'll kick off with the backgrounds of both of these guys here. So Slick and Guido, if you want to hit us up with your backgrounds, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll start since Guido's drinking coffee there. So I think for me it was Air Force Academy. Graduated in 91, pilot training in Arizona at Williams Air Force Base, which is no longer around. I think they closed in 92, 93. And then went that was post Gulf War. There was a little bit of like delay for guys going onto their weapon system because of the drawdown after that whole thing. So went back to school for about a year and then went to F-15 training in Florida. From there on to Okinawa. That's where Guido and I became friends. That was our first ops tour. We were both young, steely-eyed wingmen in Japan for a tour. That was a great couple of years. We'll save some of those good stories for a later time. But so did that. Went to Florida after that. Became an instructor pilot. Guido and I actually both ended up in the same place there doing that as well. And then I went off to NATO for a while in England. And then we kind of split off. And I'll let Guido tell his own story. But I flew a couple more tours. Retired at Air Combat Headquarters in 2011. Nice. And I was flying with the 71st as a staff desk driver, but I was flying part-time with the 71st. I was the chief of Stanoval for Air Combat Command. And then got out and started being Mr. Bebo. That's it for me.
Man. That's one hell of a rap sheet there you got.
Yeah, it was a fun life, man.
It's all over now, though, old guy.
That's right. Just old gray beard.
So in '88, I'm walking at my college. I went to a place called Weber State College in Utah, and it's kind of very near the pattern for Hill Air Force Base, which had F4s and 105s and F-16s flying around all the time. And I was a junior in college with zero plan. I was still pre-law. And my dad was Air Force. He was a Ford Air Controller in Vietnam, SLOFAC and 01 Bird Dogs. Among other things, he flew cargo, UH-1s. He helped stand up pararescue in the Air Force. He did all kinds of stuff. But anyway, he had always told me, hey, why don't you check out ROTC? And there was no way I was going to be my old man. It's not that I didn't get along with my old man. I got along with my old man famously really well. He was a great man. But I just wasn't going to be him. I didn't want to do that. But I had no plan, and I saw the airplanes. I went, yeah, whatever. What harm? I'll go talk to the ROTC guy. And I'm a history major. So I go over there. I'm thinking, well, the first thing they're going to do is ask me what my major is, and I'm going to be cold out and gone. So I've told Slick this story, but the guy's name was, I'm terrible with names, but I will never forget this guy's name, Captain Mark Gonski. Set up a meeting, go in there. I got pretty long hair. He says, all right, what are we talking about? Well, I'm thinking about the Air Force, maybe ROTC, and I start right off with I'm a junior, so I don't know how that works. Can I even get going? He's like, well, that's not a problem. I went, okay. He says, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, whatever, I want to fly, obviously, right? And he says, okay, what's your history major? I said, well, this is the end. I'm going to tell him history. He's going to laugh. I said, history. He's like, okay. So anyway, long story short, I get through that. I added a year of college. So I did the strenuous 5-year history plan in college. This was very difficult kind of thing. And I ended up going through all that, and I went to pilot training, got caught up in the same thing Slick did. The end of the Cold War, right as the Gulf War thing was ending, was when I got commissioned. So my choice was get out. They actually offered, all right, fine, you don't owe us anything, or go in as a non-rated. And so Slick went to school. I went as a personnel officer. So I spent 3 years at Phoenix. Said this is CRS, just hit me. Can't remember shit. Anyway, whatever that base is called in Phoenix.
That was Williams.
Luke. I ended up
Luke.
as a personnel officer for 3 years. My first deployment was as a personnel officer to Khamis Mashat in Saudi Arabia right after the war with the stink bugs, with the 117s as their personnel guy.
Oh, nice.
So I did that for 3 years and finally got to pilot training. So I was delayed going, and went to pilot training. Then went to Kadena with Slick. Ended up at Tyndall as an instructor. And then for me, I went from Tyndall to Germany as what's called an air liaison officer. So I was assigned to the Army for the first division to be an ALO, be the expert on air power. Me, the air-to-air guy, right? Going to the Army to be the expert on mostly air-to-ground stuff is what they cared about. So that was interesting. That's how I ended up in the second invasion of Iraq, driving a Humvee from Kuwait into Baghdad. I was the second Eagle driver on the ground into Baghdad.
That's awesome.
The first one was actually in an APC on the Thunder Run. He's the first guy. I was the second one to drive in with it. And I was actually with the Marines. That's a whole nother story. And once that was over in Germany. Once I got done with that, I came back to Eglin, flew the Eagle again. And then I got a bonus assignment back to Tyndall as a more senior officer, not a senior officer, but lieutenant colonel, to fly the Eagle one more time for a little while here. Then I went to be an ALO into Korea. So I spent a year in Korea as director of operations for the ASOS over there. And then back to Tyndall, which was kind of my good deal because that was the end of the career. It was going over. It was kind of ending at that point. And I had one more deployment to Kuwait as a lieutenant colonel and then retired. And that's pretty much the long and short of how I got here.
Okay. So, Slick, your last flight in Eagle was what, 2011 then?
Yeah, probably early 2011. I was, like I said, I was at Langley. Was flying with the Ironman, and my last sort of training flight where I was doing any kind of like real fun stuff was going out as Red Air. I think we were talking about this the other day. I'm trying to remember now if I was Redford ACM or what, and I was flying with a couple of Raptors, and I think I was their Red Air. And so that was my last sort of like fun flight. And then my last flight, it was a bit kind of sad because I ferried one of the Eagles from Langley down to the Guard in New Orleans. And so it was kind of like I was putting that jet out to pasture while I was being put out to pasture. And it was, so that was my last actual flight, was just a ferry flight. Interesting flight too, because I think I lost a generator about halfway through the flight and decided, screw it, this jet's about to go get taken apart, so I might as well just finish the flight. So I flew
So I had two.
I was like, I got another one. That one's still working. And it was day, it was VFR. So,
Man,
it was a little bit sad, but my last flight that I really count was probably my Finney flight in Okinawa, because I was the, in fact, I'm looking on the Wreck-It Ralph is on here. Wreck-It Ralph and I worked together in Okinawa, in the safety office just before I left. So, seems like ages ago.
Good stuff. And Guido, when was your last Eagle flight then?
My last Eagle flight was 2009. My last flight was 2014, because I left off one cool thing I got to do in my last assignment. I was actually the inspector general for the wing, but it's a unit a lot of you guys are going to be familiar with, because it's the same unit that Movers flies with the Adversary Air T-38. So the last thing I did was about a year in a couple months, they called me up. I was sitting around the office because it was a non-flying job for my last job. And they were just spinning up the adversary air for the F-22s here at Tyndall. And like, hey, Guido, you want to fly 38s for a year? I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, I do. So I flew as adversary air in T-38s for my last time of about a year. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Good stuff. All right, so we'll keep it moving here. So we've got deployment workups. What did they look like for you guys, and how many days a week were you flying in the lead up to deployments?
Guido probably had a lot more of that than I did. I had this weird sort of timing thing where a full squadron deployment to a combat area I was never part of. I went onesie twosie to fill in for in other units, and my only time actually in the desert, I didn't fly. It didn't actually fly. I was in the operations center doing the daily air tasking order. So I spent a lot of time underground typing into 1970s style computers. That's the only real kind of deployment stuff I did. Most of my deployments were the TDY, the temporary duty type training deployments with the squadron to get ready for the big ones.
Yeah. Okay.
So what you'll do is you'll go back to basics. The weapons officer and the DO and the commander will come up with a plan, and the instructors, and they'll basically start at the beginning, and then they'll start slow building block and build you up to where you're doing whatever it is you're going to do at the end. It's usually some kind of ACT thing, depending on the deployment. For example, we did Operation Northern Watch, and we knew that one of the reindeer games that the Iraqis played is they fly their MiG-25, and they take off and do what we call the pork chop pattern. They get high and fast, and they make a run at the border because there were two borders, the no-fly and the southern no-fly, and they'd act like they were coming, and then they'd turn away. But in order to react to a high fast flyer, you got to get going early, because you can't just try to intercept something doing Mach 2 by getting late to the game without getting any details.
Yeah.
Other than knowing you want your missile to have the best chance at the end. So you need to, once you see that, of course, we have good radar and AWACS, and they let us know this guy's doing it. So in that example, we spent a lot of time in the sim practicing what that profile looked like in order to react to whatever it is. And any deployment you do, you're going to do the same thing. We did Pitch Black, which was down in Australia, and that's a lot of night stuff. So you would do a lot of night flying, getting ready for Pitch Black as just one example. So even for training TUIs, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to practice that thing, both in the sim and actually flying. So a spin up will look exactly like that. You have a training plan to get ready for whatever it is you're going to go do. And it can take anywhere from, a month for a small thing to 6 months. If you got a big desert deployment, you could be working on that for 6 months, because it's not just the flying, it's the logistics, it's the getting your people there, it's where you're going to live, it's yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I know we got a couple of Aussies in chat there. I saw Tourniquet HD before, and he was an F-111 maintainer. But there'd probably be some interest in talking about Pitch Black a little bit more, maybe later in the stream, hearing about how you found it fighting against the Aussie Hornets and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've got great stories about Pitch Black. That was the first time as a young wingman where I ever actually went out and did large force employment stuff, and
it was scary.
Yeah, I remember middle of the night, and I'm in an older F-15, and I'm just holding on for dear life, trying to stay with my flight lead. And we got back after that. I had no idea what had happened for the last.
Did we even have fiddle then? I don't remember if we even had it.
No, we didn't. We didn't have any of that. It was all looking out the window. We didn't have NVGs. We didn't have fiddle. We didn't have anything.
What's fiddle?
Data link.
Okay, data link. Yeah.
Yeah. I spent the entire time just water skiing behind my flight lead, just trying to hang on for dear life.
So the formation on that is offset and trailing. So you're keeping track of your flight lead with your radar and your air-to-air TACAN and your IFF, and that's all you got.
That's it.
And the lights are off because you know what it's called? Pitch Black.
Yeah, exactly. And there was nothing. There wasn't a single shred of light anywhere.
Oh man, that was crazy.
Terrifying.
Now I know it sounds obvious, but that's from an F-15C standpoint, that would have been just all BVR, right? Because you don't do BFM and ACM at night. So
no, it's limited maneuvering, so it's you can maneuver 180. Yeah,
it's an interesting contrast, because that being my first sort of large force exercise, and the amount of just trying to keep track of everything. And then one of my last ones, on my last ops assignment in Okinawa was red flag. And, now we had the helmet, we had data link, we had NVGs, we had everything. And now on my first big ride there, I was a mission commander of Red Air. And so I had 14 Eagles that I was in charge of, and we were hitting tankers and we were doing everything on the red flag ranges. And in that case, I knew where everybody was.
Yeah.
All I had to do was just look, and I had, we had NVGs. You just knew where everything was. It was the contrast from my first one to my last one was just huge.
Yeah. And was that the Advis 9? What were you guys using for NVGs in the Eagle?
I don't even know what.
We had the older ones, and I don't remember the nomenclature, to be quite honest.
Me neither. They were really heavy, and they were a real pain in the ass to use.
We had the hand-me-downs because, there was not as much reason, obviously, for not air-to-ground people to have NVG. So we always had the older models that were handed down to us.
You kind of had to make a choice, if I recall, Guido. It was like either you're going to wear your Jehemics or your NVGs, but they're not compatible. So
yeah, they were still working on that years ago. I don't know where it stands, whether they have a compatible one now or not. But yeah, that was the choice. In fact, and I never flew with the helmet, so a lot of times at night, especially on student rides here when I was at Tyndall doing the IP thing, I wouldn't even use them. I mean, I had them, and if I needed them, but I'd flip them up because I was more comfortable just flying standard night stuff with contracts and whatnot. The NVGs sometimes got you into a false sense of security, and that could be a problem.
I was the same way.
And how was the data link in the F-15? Are you allowed to talk about that? Was it a pretty good thing to have?
A hell of a lot better than no data link.
Yeah.
We can't talk about details, but I can't answer the question about whether it's better. Yes.
Yeah, being able to look down at a screen and kind of know what everybody's doing instead of having to ask and try to remember it and figure it out and try to remember this whole matrix of who's targeting who and all that. That was a big deal.
I mean, let me ask your DCS players. Some of these guys in here probably do some of the BVR stuff, right?
Yeah.
So think about when you hit F10, guys, and you get the map and the SA that gives you. Now, a lot of times the red air is not, depends on the server, but a lot of times the red air is not there. But at the very least, you know where the fields are, where your buddies are. You can see missiles. I mean, you don't see that in data link. You get more from that, but it's the same idea. This is a fused system of holy cow. Here's my place in the world. Yeah. And think of that, having that capability in the jet. Not exactly like that, but more info is better if you can process it.
And, before we had the actual data link between all the jets and everything working really well. Again, earlier on in our career, just having lines on the map. So you could, figure out where the airspace is and actually find your cap and things like that. I mean, even just that, because again, early on when Guido and I were going through the B course, I can't remember for you, Guido, but when I started in the B course, we did not have MISSIP jets. We had some, but the 95th, which is what I went through, was still the old steam-driven Eagles, and so we didn't have any of that stuff. We still had the axe panel with the little magnetic hard switches to do your weapons loadouts and everything. And it was
pie in the sky, man. You did everything off of your HSI. Yeah. If you look at the old school pilot training bases when they're flying 37s and 38s, all the airspaces were typically in like a circle around the base, so you could do radials or off of attack end somewhere else. But it was so you could do radial station keeping on whether you were going out of the airspace or not. I'm sure you dealt with that too. And that once you've got an actual map, and like Slick said, even if it was just lines, and then later it was just your foreship, each iteration was better and better.
I mean, have you seen the way the data link is presented in the DCS Viper, like with the SAM threat circles? Even that, just having that is amazing. Yeah, really good stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I can
it comes to that's interesting. That's a whole nother subject because it's how well is it presented and how easy is it to digest, and is there too much or too little? That's always a question, right? Yeah. You could cover that thing in lines and data, and it wouldn't be very useful. Yeah. But you can put more than you might think, and it's all training. It's what you're trained to see and use and do.
Yeah, the data link and all that stuff, man. You'd spend a lot of time on the ground. setting up your declutter before you get airborne,
Yeah.
so that you could toggle all the noise on and off.
Yeah. And so when they introduced Starlink into the Eagle, did they have to do anything with the HOTAS to allow that to get integrated, or how did that work? Was it just on the MFD, or?
Well, they have to figure that out, right? I mean, you only have so many buttons and switches.
Yeah.
And the MPCD, we call it MPCD, but it's an MFD, had buttons around it, and so there's different pages. You have to learn it. They introduce it and they tell you here's how it works, and then hopefully it gets updated. In theory, gets better as people give feedback. But of course, the engineers built it, and there's always that problem of engineers building something they think is good, and then giving it to the pilots, and the pilots going, "This is useless."
Yeah.
I
think if I recall, you had to. We got where you could toggle which screen you were controlling. Guys, it's been a while, but
yeah,
I think that was probably the biggest one. Is sometimes your act symbols you would have to move them between the screens now. And when it first started, sometimes you'd get in this mode where you'd be like, I have no idea where my
That's right. That's where my act symbols go.
Yeah,
I just have to say thanks to a few guys in chat here. Shifty coming in with a raid of 86 people. We had quite a few followers there. Blazkowicz, Mascant12, Tinners, thanks. Helgado. Thanks to Shinobi for the 67 bits there. Yeah, we're thrilled to have you guys along with us. And thanks, Nevlin. Yeah, it's great. And this is awesome. The clinic, the way it's working, and having people like 1212 Gaming, these two guys here, come and join us and chat about their stories, man. It's a good time to be involved with the flight sim community. Good things are happening. But all right, so back to deployments then. Slick, you said you didn't get to do many deployments, but Guido, you went to the Middle East. What was the flying over there like for you? How did you find that? I mean, we get a lot of talk in DCS from guys saying, it's very common for a fighter pilot to go his entire career without actually shooting something down. How did you find it going on deployment and coming back from that?
So it's definitely different for the sea community. Because of the various wars we've been doing for 20 years now, the 16 guys, the 18 guy, and nearly everybody else, frankly, has done a lot of dropping, actual live ordnance on actual bad guys. So if you talk to one of those dudes, they're gonna have all kinds of information on actual combat. I have some combat, I'm using air quotes, time, but it's boring holes in the sky over northern Iraq. The only qualification was it was hostile territory, but of course there wasn't anything going on. Occasionally they'd turn something on and it would get schwacked. If they could, they would shoot visual, 57 Mike and whatever at us, but we were never 15C. We're up in the bozosphere. They're never going to come close. I did run one intercept on a MiG-25, but he never came close to crossing the line. I mentioned that earlier. We started the whole profile and we got turned around. As soon as I got the radar downrange, he was already bailing out. He had no intention of coming across the line. So my experience of combat is that, the most combat I got into, and still I didn't actually do any active stuff, I was just around it. It was when I was on the ground in a Humvee with the Marines, going north. And even then I'm at the regiment headquarters. If anybody shot at me, I didn't know. I was blissfully unaware. So that probably means they didn't. You'd probably be aware. But anyway, I could see the firefights going on and crap around. So for 15C guy, it's very different. And I would say that's very true what you said. It's been a long time. When's the last time we shot anyone down, Slick?
Oh, God. It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
Bosnia, right? It wasn't World War Storm. There was what, Bosnia?
Oh, yeah, there's some. In the book, in the Eagle book, like I'm blanking on the title, but it's got some good stories in there about the guys over in Eastern Europe during that whole thing.
Yeah. And we know MiG killers. I mean, both of us are personal friends with multiple guys that have kills in World War Storm and Bosnia and stuff. But all that was all whack-a-mole. I mean, there
hasn't been an Eagle kill that wasn't like clubbing baby seals in a long time, right? They're mostly just you're all over them, and it's kind of an easy kill, none of them are easy, but it's not like what you're doing in DCS with these complicated scenarios. I mean, you're never getting that far in real because you're just overpowering them so early in the game.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing to process, isn't it? That you guys spend so much time in your careers training for scenarios that just are so far from what could possibly, what might eventuate an actual combat scenario like a BFM or ACM engagement. I mean, you guys have, we've had quite a few chats now, and you've said to me in the past that, a lot of stuff has to go wrong if you find yourself in a merge in an Eagle, right?
But it's also why we spend so much time, and the Eagle guys always had sort of the moniker of, the keeper of the training rules, all these things. And that's part of the reason why we would take training so seriously. I used to joke with family members, and it's a bit like the same attitude of like a Shaolin monk. You're always practicing fighting and all that kind of stuff in the hopes that you never do it, but because you probably never will for real. And that's why the training was always so important, and why we took it so seriously.
Yeah, it's almost
really have a chance.
Yeah, it's almost a victim of your own success kind of story right there. But that being said, that doesn't mean there aren't capable air forces, and that kind of capability that the Eagle and now the Raptor bring to the table isn't going to be required, because other air forces have closed the gap.
Yeah.
And even though it's mainly Soviet equipment that we took on, former Soviet or Russian equipment, a lot of times, the training was questionable, the amount of hours those people. But there are countries who have the training and the hours, and it's not going to go like that if it comes to a push to shove. So you have to be careful about getting that I'm 10 feet tall thing and can't be defeated. You still have to train and go, you know what, guys, that these guys are bringing a lot more to the table than you would think. Yeah. And that goes a lot to what we've been talking about training and the possibilities of VR and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. Tourniquet HD's question in chat lines up exactly with our own Word document here that we're working through about his air fueling. So he's asked, is it easier to tank in the Eagle in real life or in DCS? Have you guys actually tried air fueling in DCS?
Never tried it in DCS.
I did. I screwed around with DCS. I think my setup is a little bit too touchy. I found it. Formation and things like that is hard in DCS, even with VR, because it's not true 3D. I see the world. When you're flying formation and when you're on the tanker, you are using a lot more of your peripheral to get relative motion of things and size and place. It's very difficult, and I know you guys know this, gamers know this, trying to fly formation with just like a flat screen where you just move your head over to the side, that's really hard. It's much easier with VR. It's air quotes easier with your full vision out there. So formation is interesting because I don't know if you had the same idea, Slick. When you're in training, when you start off pilot training T-37, when you're doing contact, it's stay away from the other airplanes. Right? You get into the pattern. You don't want to get close to other airplanes because that's bad. You don't want to hit it. And then all of a sudden you have a mission where you're supposed to take off and get close to another airplane. It is hard at first. You're kind of like, I'm not supposed to be close to other airplanes. That's a bad thing. But very quickly, it's
when you spend a lot of time, in the jet when you're flying close formation and stuff, where it's, I don't know, you're kind of wiggling all the controls constantly, like a little bit. It's like you're to stay loose, because if you start death gripping the stick and mashing your feet down on the rudder pedals and stuff, it just gets really, really difficult. And so you can't. That feel is kind of gone. I don't know. It's sort of like when you're trying to do fine muscle movements, and it's easier to have a force against it.
Yeah.
Like you have the ability in the jet where you can kind of, and that's why I think we talked about this the other day. Guys have moved from the Eagle over to like side sticks and force sticks, like especially like guys. I know a bunch of guys who went over to like the Thunderbirds, and they're like, for the first couple of months of flying the airplane, because you don't have that same feel, they're ratcheting everything, and they're constantly over controlling the airplane, and then eventually you get down to that same the opposing forces, I guess.
Man, Guido knows exactly about that, and the fact that I can relate to it, because I recently moved over to the R3 FSSB, which is a force sensing stick, and it was literally like trying to relearn how to use my hands. For 2 weeks, my aim sucked. It really did.
So that's actually really great, Lobo, because you learned that same thing in the virtual world with the same type of equipment. I mean, that's fascinating to me that same thought process and actual knowledge came to you through the VR. For the tanking thing, specifically for the is it hard? Not really. I don't remember. I think I heard of, or maybe it happened early when I got to training, of one student who washed out because he couldn't tank, but he was weak anyway. I mean, if you can't tank, you probably have other issues. and that might be the ride that gets you, but you've probably hooked other rides up to that kind of thing. So rarely is tanking a problem in getting someone trained to it. On occasion, you can have a bad day, and it can be a problem. You can, for whatever reason, you just bad weather, whatever's going on, you can't do it.
Lots of pilgrims. We'll come back to your question there, but we'll just hit up tanking here for a bit. What were you going to say, Slick?
I was just going to say, and sometimes with things like tanking, people that are having trouble, it can sometimes be related to just sort of not trusting or listening to the techniques that you're given. Like when I'm on the boom, once you get on the boom and you're connected, you're at least for me, I was able to stay pretty solid by the end of my career, but most of it, I'm looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right? So this mirror right here, you adjust that mirror so that you can actually see the boom, and you can see the apple and the sleeve, and you're kind of glancing, doing the little gecko glancing over here to make sure you're staying centered, but you're mostly just looking over here, and you have to kind of trust that, and you can get really solid with it because you can see movement very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you try to teach a guy how to do it, and they just won't. They just won't listen. So
yeah.
And so something
DCS, you can't use the mirror. That's one thing that I couldn't figure out.
DCS are horrible.
You can't use the mirror, so because the Eagle refuels off your left shoulder, and that ball that we call the apple is right here. So you're actually it's behind you by the time you get close.
It's literally, you could reach out and grab it with your hand. It's pretty close to your head.
But we turn the mirror out slightly to keep an eye on it. That helps us with the forward back part to some extent, so that we keep the green apple right in the middle, upright. You have it on the sleeve. Basically, you want to see half the green apple. And then we look forward and we watch the lights if we can. But oh, by the way, the 135 lights are notoriously crap.
Well, they are in DCS as well, so that's funny.
Yeah. Or you have the sun blazing you in the eye and you're never going to see it anyway. So then it becomes, we had different, like said, the heading, I believe it was the heading scale on the bottom of the jet or up at where the lights were. And then we would go vert scan, but we turned off our radar.
Yeah.
So that we wouldn't lock the guy. You don't want to be blasting him with energy from 10 feet away. But the vert scan line would be a thing for left and right. So there was some thing, and you can't do that in DCS because if you go vert scan, it locks them. There's no.
But you could use radar to lock the tanker when you were trying to rejoin on him, right? That was the thing.
You could until they wanted you turned off by 3,000 or so, 6,000. Okay. It's kind of bad form to blast all the guys with.
Yeah. And so, how much did the difficulty notch up at night then? Trying to tank at night, was that a lot harder?
It was somewhat harder, I'd say.
Yeah.
Not too bad, but the rejoin was the scary part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think once you get on the boom at night, it depends on the tanker. The tanker fleet itself is such a wide range of how well the lights work, and you got to remember there's people in the tanker too, and sometimes they're turning the lights up a little high, a little low, and now you're coming up with night vision, and your eyes have kind of adjusted. So it depends on lots of things, but if you're with a tanker where all the lights are nice and clear, and once you get on the tanker and you can actually see the boom they got a little bit of a light shining on it, then it's kind of the same.
Like if you're three bags and you're high, say there's some weather and he's high anyway, and you're three bags, now you could actually be in min AB on an engine.
Wow.
Trying to stay on the boom because as you get heavier, and then the attitudes change. You're gonna have more AOA as you get heavier. Now you're in half AB, and you're just barely getting more fuel in than you're kicking out the back end. There's a lot of weird little things that happen. You get a tanker and he says, "Hey, we're going autopilot off." You're like, "Oh God, here we go."
If you're doing a deployment and you're out over the middle of the ocean and you're wearing your anti-exposure suit, your poopy suit, and it's night, and your three bags. And so you're basically getting topped off constantly. It's just like Guido said. So now you're 1,000 miles from anything out over the middle of the ocean going, man, I hope I can get gas out of this thing right now because I really don't want to, not be able to make it to land.
Because the door may just decide not to open.
Yeah.
And so coming back to NVGs during night tanking then, is that a personal preference thing? Or if you had goggles on, you had to stay on goggles? Oh, you didn't tank with NVGs?
Okay. No. Did you, Slick? I never tanked with NVGs.
No, I don't think so. I would use them for the rejoin, and I same as you. Maybe it was the way I learned it, but I would take them off or flip them up.
Just flip them up. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's any Viper drivers in chat. I'm not sure if Viper drivers use NVGs. I mean, I've seen video of like helicopters doing it with the probe and drogue, but I don't know. That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer if anyone else actually.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they're not quite good enough, but maybe some of the new ones are and they use them. Don't know.
On the J model Herc, the NVGs were so close to the HUD that if you got a bump in turbulence, you could actually contact the HUD with the NVGs.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah, there wasn't much room there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to chat here briefly. So Tourniquet, Pilgrim, we'll come back to that question about the attack stuff. Tourniquet says, "What's the worst thing you've done to make a jet go unserviceable?" He's asking for a maintainer friend.
Let me just start off by saying we love our maintainers, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Great Americans. I know this is an international crew here, so great people as well. Go ahead, Slick. What's the worst thing you did?
Oh man, that's something I haven't thought about in a while. Like the worst thing that I ever did to break an airplane. I don't think I had anything real. I mean, I've blown a tire. Never anything crazy on the runway. I mean, I think I took 3 or 4 cables on the runway during my career, but that's not really damage anything. I mean, I've over G'd a few times. I think the biggest over G I ever did was 9.5.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was a good one.
That's a serious one.
Yeah, that one was. I got in a lot of trouble for that one. But
that's a pretty good disregard for the G limit right there.
Yeah, it was in a. I thought I was trying to do a jink, and I was a little bit faster than I thought I was. So, yeah, I nothing major for me. I never broke anything off the airplane or ran into anything.
Yeah,
I probably have. I guess about 6 over Gs roughly. Just, I mean, I couldn't name them, but it feels like about like that. I've struck birds 5 times in various airplanes and various numbers of birds in those 5 times. I've taken 4 or 5 cables like Slick. I had a pretty massive fuel leak once at Eglin. That was probably the one that I came closest to not getting back because I landed with probably 500 pounds left. A single engine because I had to turn the engine off. There's an EP where a pretty large, Pete and the maintainer may know that, but I can't remember what it was. It was a knuckle or something that would shift off or break off, and you couldn't stop the fuel; it just poured out. I came back single engine at pitch black once, but that was a gauge. So it caused me to shut an engine down for oil, but there was actually nothing wrong with it. That kind of crap.
Yeah.
So really, over Gs and cables, blown tire in the Eagle, blown tire in the T-38 when I was requaling the T-38, doing a touch and go. Pull the power, land, start to push the power up, kind of feel just a little bit of that sink. And I'm like, oh, that didn't feel right. And we take off. So I think we blew a tire, man. And the IP was in the back. A friend of mine, he's like, I didn't really feel anything. No, it definitely settled, dude. So we got to rejoin. The other 38 was looking at us, goes, well, it appears your tire is fine. Well, it had blown, but it hadn't shredded.
Yeah.
So it was flat, but it looked okay. That's why you use the word appears. It appears you're on fire.
It appears, yeah. You never know for sure. I had a hung missile once. Had to come back, land with a hung missile. And when the guys came up to safe everything up, the missile was still on the side of the airplane, and all the fins started flapping against the side of the jet, and people were diving into ditches and stuff.
Oh,
that was
jeez.
That was pretty fun. But again, nothing got wrecked. It was just hilarious to watch because I didn't know what was going on.
Wow. I had two fusible plugs on a PC9 blow on the mains, so we taxied in with blown wheels once. Yeah. Bullet says, did you use any sunshades on long flights for the canopy? Any sunshades?
No. The only time I did that is I was over the Med, somewhere around Malta, and it was early in the morning. We'd come out of the Azores. We're going to Turkey, and the sun was coming up straight in my eyeball, and we're trying to tank. So I took my map and I created my own sunshade to block the sun, so I could peek under it. I think I was actually peeking over it. It was blocking the sun here, and then I could see the bottom. Yeah, that's what was going on. I could see the bottom of the tanker, just so for my references, and I could use the mirror, but this was blocked off because the sun was just boring into my eye. So that was a self-built sunshade, right? But otherwise, you sit there and bake. The helmet gets really hot sometimes.
We got a question from R. Gordon Pilot here. He said, not a fangs out type of question, but super curious. I fly corporate and always wondered about cross-country planning for fighters. Could you walk through a cross-country trip here from Air Force Base XYZ to KLAX? How did you set it up? Rockwell Collins ARINC type electronic planning, loaded on data cards, or entered into the INS? Can you fly a SID Star? Pull from a database or enter grid ref for all waypoints? Can you fly GPS, LNAV, MINS?
I'm gonna let Slick answer, but I'm gonna say one thing that the fighter pilot attitude about cross country is: I'm a single seat fighter pilot. Know me, love me, help me. That that's
Know me, love me, help me.
So I got two stories. First of all, if you're going cross country, you pull out one of the big maps. I'm trying to remember, is it an ONC or GNC? I can't remember which one. And you take your flight hat and you lay it on the map. And if any destination that's within the distance of your hat, you can make it. Right? And then you get airborne and you go INS direct. That's how fighter pilots go cross country. Right? You get airborne, you go request INS direct, and then you get up to about 49,000 feet and just fly over everything.
So top speed then? What's the top speed you've been on one of these then?
Well, you're supposed to stay under the Mach. It's poor form to go over the Mach over the CONUS. They really don't dig that too much. You kind of have to ask them.
Yeah.
Or need an emergency, or you're on some kind of intercept. To more seriously, we do the standard planning. We figure out how much gas we have. We'll go ahead and do a flight plan. We'll put it in. Usually it's manual. To be honest, I don't know what they have right now, but we have a lot of people around us to help us do that stuff. A lot of times a lieutenant will be handed, all right, the sport ship's going somewhere here, figure it out, file the flight plan, call them, or take it over. We have base ops. So base ops' whole job is to do that kind of thing. We just hand them the flight plan and they pile it all in. So, but if we can go INS direct, GPS for Raptors, they have that. I don't know if they can actually do, I'm not sure if they're qualified to do approaches on GPS, but we were pretty steam driven, dude. We had TACANs and an ILS, and ILSs are, Air Force. A lot of Navy bases don't even have an ILS.
Yeah. You remember in early days, what did they call it? Was it ASLR? That was like the mass recovery.
Oh God.
Everybody would come down the chute on the TACAN, and you'd have guys just landing one right after the
timing. So you're all in the holding pattern, and you're stacked 1,000 feet, and then the first two ship goes in a lot of times as a formation landing, and then everyone's timing after that, and ATC says go go go.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about, oh my God, scary.
Like carrier ops at an Air Force base or something.
Yeah. Now, I may as well jump forward to a question here in the list from Play School. He said, do you think that the thrust in the DCS Eagle is less than the real jet? And have you got any other comments on the flight model of the DCS Eagle?
I think it's more. But although that could be my feeling of it, because I think it's modeling 220s. Is that right, Slick? Do you know?
It feels, I don't know how to answer it, because it feels like the jet gets knots back too quickly and it bleeds them off too quickly. So there's something just off, but I can't quite put my finger on it. But it does seem to get knots back a little bit too quickly most of the time. So the answer is probably yeah.
The one thing it does do that I remember is if you guys call it, what do you call it? I call it spike in the AOA, but you got a different term. I can't remember. Anyway, with the nose authority, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I call that like an alpha spike as well. And you see the really aggressive Eagle drivers in DCS do that all the time. Yeah.
And like in the real jet, if you get below 250 and you hold that stick back, you've got to break the AOA so that your wing is no longer stalled. And that's a thing in DCS too. And I actually, it took me a while to kind of remember that whole idea, because we do it by feel.
Yeah.
But in DCS, you almost have to take the stick and jam it all the way forward to break that AOA. You don't quite have to do that in Eagle, but it is a little bit more forward than you'd think. And you're breaking the AOA so that you can start creating lift on the wing again and start to accelerate. And that's the one thing that I find to be very similar to how the actual jet reacts.
Okay. Yeah. And so that alpha spike is actually a characteristic in the real Eagle. You guys can do that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you see a little bit of it. I just the other day reprogrammed my stick. I'm still trying to get optimal settings, and I did kind of the curve profile, and it feels a little bit more like the Eagle, because the Eagle has the control, the CAS right? And it sort of manages the amount of deflection and everything, and so it's not linear in the Eagle. And that was the biggest problem I had when I started doing this is using a joystick. It's all linear, and it just felt really weird. But I've got it a little bit closer now because I've got a curved profile on my joystick.
Well, I was just laughing at Tony's comment there. 15 Carlos, we see that a fair bit, and I think you guys know about that now.
Yeah.
But is that something that knows that alpha spiking ability of the Eagle? Is that something that you could actually surprise a Hornet with in real BFM? I know Guido, you've talked about in the past, just not respecting the nose pointing ability of a Hornet, or getting some gun footage of your own. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the nose authority is there in the Eagle. Is it as much as in DCS? I'm not sure. DCS may have a little bit more. I think, like Slick said, because of the ability to peel off the knots a little faster, I feel like there's something physics-wise that's not really been simplified in the game a little bit. Okay, so it's not quite the same as the Eagle. But I will say that I do feel like I'm flying the Eagle when I'm flying DCS. I do, even with the little differences. It is immersive in VR, especially. It feels like it. It flies like it. I think that's really fantastic, man.
That is a good comment right there. All right, so 9/11. Where were you guys when 9/11 went down, and did it change anything in the way you were doing things, like your weekly flying roster or what you were getting up to?
Yeah, go ahead. We were both at Tyndall at the time, right?
We were, yeah. I was driving across a bridge which goes across to the base, listening to the news on the radio, driving in to do a student sortie, an ACM sortie. Turns out, actually, I was lead. I had a student as number 2, and I had an IP who was going to be my Bandit 3 ship going out. And standard student sortie was, I don't know what time this whole thing went down. It seems like it was later in the morning. It was
It was in the morning because I
9 or 10 or so.
We were night flying, so I was still at the house, and
that's why it was
watching like Good Morning America or something.
The wing was night flying, so the first sortie, I had a day sortie. So when we night flew, the first sortie was briefed at 11. So I think that's kind of when it happened, 10 or 11, but whatever it was. But it was about that time of morning, kind of mid morning, and I hear that an airplane had hit the Twin Towers, and I kind of went, "Oh, that's weird," because sometimes light planes will do like, oh, maybe it's foggy in New York and a light plane somehow accidentally hit one of the Twin Towers. I'm like, oh, that sucks. So I go in, walk into where the OPSO or where the ops desk is, and the top 3 is there. It's the guy who kind of runs everything. And he's like, hey, did you hear an airplane hit the towers? And I'm like, yeah, I heard that. So are we briefing or what? And he's like, yeah, we don't know anything about it right now. So just go ahead and go down there and brief. I'm like, all right. So I walk down the hall and I start getting my boards together. Walked back out, looked at the picture, and it was clear blue sky, and there's a big bunch of smoke coming out of one of the towers. And I went, that okay. And they still didn't kind of know anything. Like they said, yeah, just go brief. So I walk down the hall, I go in, I get to time hack, I start admin, and then the door opens. He's like, we're done, come out. Another airplane just hit. And within about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and we kind of watched all this. Call comes in, squadron commander, all pilots into the to the pilot briefing room. We're all sitting in there, and he's like, all right, nobody leave, don't call anybody, be back here in an hour. We're doing some planning. And then within about 2 hours, I'm being briefed on ROE for shooting down airliners.
Yeah.
And that's how fast it turned.
Yeah. I was, like I said, I was sitting watching the news, and I turned on the news, and it was same as you, Guido. It was already, picture of the one tower with the smoke coming out, and I was like, wow, that's really strange. And then as I was watching it, the second airplane, I watched it fly into the second one, and I reached over, picked up the phone, and called my squadron commander. Was like, hey man, do I need to come in? And he's like, yep. Yeah. Quick. And so I got up, got dressed, went in, and I think I was actually I was currently grounded because I had, for some medical thing I just had done, and so I ended up in the tower for the next 10 hours as the SOF, the supervisor of flying,
launching and recovering caps,
just on the radio, because they're arming jets. I mean, I don't even know where we were getting all the missiles and stuff from, but I remember it was like, yeah, It was crazy.
So it's interesting because we're a training unit, right? And the base happened to have some armament because it does missile shoots for other units there as well. So there was a big process to figure out what could be released to us, and we finally, like said, we armed up. I think the first guys took off with a couple of eaters,
Yeah.
a couple of eaters and gun.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Air Force was too keen on using the training fighters, even though it was IPs, because we weren't really current qualified combat pilots technically, but they had to do what they had to do, and pretty quickly they dialed back Tyndall because, like, we still got to keep the pipeline. But past that, to the rest of your question, how did it change things? Well, it changed a lot of things. I mean, we spent years after that capping over cities long past the time where it mattered.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, did you guys ever, process what that would be like having to shoot down an airliner? Was that?
Yeah.
Dude, that was a bridge I wasn't going to cross until I was crossing it.
My next assignment after Tyndall was I got a NATO assignment, and I was in England in an underground air defense bunker, and I was basically the chief of defensive ops. And so now, again, it was a non-flying gig for a little while, and that was now the thing. And it was post 9/11, and my job was, I had a red phone to Tony Blair there, and that was the thing. So we spent a ton of time, doing scenarios and role playing that exact thing. And I had to pick up the phone twice during the time that I was there. And usually it was, hey, somebody forgot to change the radio frequency, but everybody was touchy.
Yeah.
Touchy for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a similar thing, not at the level he did, but I was what's called a FIDO, the fighter duty officer, and I did that for Southeast Air Defense when it used to exist. And the same thing, we ran through those scenarios every morning. As you did shift change, you would do a scenario just to keep everybody up on the ROE and what was going on. And I sat there watching the air picture in the southeast area of the U.S. and watched as the controllers ran intercepts on usually doctors who forgot to change their radio, or they're flying through a pop-up RAWs of some kind that they didn't pay attention to on the NOTAMs or whatever.
Yeah.
And usually they got followed, and some black van showed up and questioned.
Yeah, man. Imagine being in your Malibu and an F-15 shows up on your left wing.
And we had that. We ran intercepts, and I know plenty of guys that intercepted Cessnas and Twins and Learjets and whatever.
So, Tawny says, who is the toughest foreign Air Force military to fight in either BVR or BFM?
That's a tough question. I've only flown against a couple, but I always found the Aussie Hornets those guys were pretty hardcore.
Brits are good. Aussies are good. Germans are good. Almost any Western Air Force. The French are good.
Yeah.
We flew the Jazz Def are pretty good.
Yeah.
A lot of it's
pretty quickly. The Jazz work because they've gotten a lot of new equipment and stuff, but they're sort of like their dedication to the whole training thing is as you would expect. I mean, they were like everything to the nth degree.
Yeah.
What did you get to fly against with the French? What did they bring? Was it the Mirage?
Mirages, yeah.
The 2000-5?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't get a lot with them because since they left NATO, it's a bit touchy security wise flying against the French. So when we do exchanges with the French, they pay a lot of attention on who's there and what you're using and stuff that I can't really get into. But as you would think, everyone's collecting on everyone, so you got to be cognizant of what's going on.
That was always weird because you're going there and you're sort of going with your friends. But then everybody's kind of, got the raised eyebrow to each other, like, it was always a little bit of a strange tension.
Yeah,
I will say here's the interesting thing for me for working with other air forces, and when you're working with the Brits, the Aussies, to some extent the Germans, and the Canadians also, especially their mindset of how they go about the training and the debrief and trying to get everything out of a flight that they can is very similar to ours.
Mm-hmm.
The USAF is kind of known for briefing and debriefing everything to the millionth degree, and I would say that those allies are as close or the same as us. You go fly with like the Saudis and some of the others, they're not that interested in spending a lot of time debriefing. Now, a lot of them are getting better and they're learning, and there are certainly individuals who do it. But on the whole, sometimes you'll go fly with some of those different countries, and they just want to fly, and then they're done. They're not interested in finding out what happened.
Yeah, I hear you. Garm One, he only flies the F-15 in DCS. He says versus 80s weapon systems like the F-14A, HPRF, LPRF, AWG-9, would you ever use chaff and maneuvers while defensive at RTR ranges in real life adversary practice to get to the merge like we do in DCS?
Well, I'm not going to go into details about how that works or what, but I will say that if I didn't want a missile to hit me, I would use what I had.
Yeah.
I don't care how good the missile is.
Yeah. Yeah, the BVR stuff's pretty touchy, guys. So
yeah. But I mean, I could, defend yourself, man. Absolutely. I'm not going to scoff any missile that came off the rail. I'm going to defend myself appropriately with whatever I've got.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that in SATAL, which is the BVR tournament. You see it. There's a difference in teams that fly just off what the RWR is telling them, and flying for expecting a missile in the air. Based on what range and what sort of timeline the guy looks like he's on. But anyway, yeah, we won't get too much into BVR stuff.
Well, that's all valid stuff, though, and we can still talk to it from a DCS standpoint. That's part, and I use this word all the time, but it's part of what fascinates me about the community and what guys are figuring out. I think there's a lot of goodness to learn from that, because gamers are going to look at a game and a system, and they're going to figure out how to min-max it and win.
Yeah,
and they're going to do that through repetitions, lots of repetitions, and they can come to a lot of really good conclusions on how things should go to win.
Yeah.
So that's completely valid.
Which brings up the Pilot X comp and also the BFM tournaments that we run. You guys have touched on this in the last couple of times we've spoken, but it's interesting to hear from your perspective how you see gamers flying in DCS, because we don't have the Gs on our bodies, we don't have some of the limitations that you have in real life. So it's almost more akin to fighting AI, isn't it, in a sense, in terms of the aggression levels and the high aspect shots, the shots in the face, the stuff that you can't train in real life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let you touch that first, man.
I'm not sure I know which question I'm answering.
Well, I guess let's just touch a little bit on the gamer real world thing, because I don't. Slick said something yesterday, and I think it was after we were talking about not wanting the term gamer BFM to be a pejorative. I think there's so much to learn from doing BFM and not having the Gs.
Yeah.
Right, because you can pay attention better to what's going on. You can see the pictures a little bit better. Or a lot bit better. I mean, you're under even 6.5, 6 Gs is still a struggle to keep your shit together and look over there and see that dot. But if you're sitting in your office chair, you go, oh, look at that line of sight. Oh, that's what it looks like. Oh, right, that's cool. And I can hold that 420. Yep, 420. I'm not at 7 Gs going, trying to not pass out. And I can see that happening. So there's a utility to that. That's important. And there may be lessons of being able to see that with repetitions that are important that you would never, ever, ever get actually flying the jet.
Yeah.
So
and you get to focus on it more too, like you said, when you're not under the G, and you can actually turn your head around. Because again, I find myself even when I'm sitting here with no G's on the airplane, I keep reaching up, trying to because in the cockpit there's
oh god, yeah, I do that.
And what you do is you're constantly like grabbing stuff in the airplane to kind of again give you that kind of opposing force and help you kind of lock down all your muscles for the G's, so that because if you don't, especially if you're wearing a Jahimix or something that's got a little bit of weight, if you turn your head the wrong way and you don't straighten up your spine and mash your back against the seat before you pull, you'll literally pull on the stick and your whole body will just slump over the stick, and now you're done. So,
and that's fun to do to people in the back seat.
Yeah,
man, I'll tell you how immersed I got into DCS one night. I was doing a Harrier mission and I landed on the boat afterwards, and I was that immersed. I went to take my NVGs off. I actually lifted the VR off my face.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So if you're doing a left-hand brake turn or rate fight in the Eagle. What guys will do, you pretty much park it into max. So you've already shoved the throttles. And what guys will do to look back if they're doing a two circle and someone's over there is they'll put their hand. The canopy comes down. There's handles on it. They'll put their hand on the handle, and you got your hand on the stick, and you're pushing like this to kind of get yourself around. So I did that the other day. I was doing a two circle, and I went, and there was nothing there. You know, I was like, oh sure.
I've done that a couple of times. I see you do it a lot, Loblo, when I'm watching you on the stream, where you're kind of looking back around this side of your seat to see on that side of the airplane, right? And you can't do that in the jet without putting your hand up on the canopy and pushing,
right?
Especially with the G. And I find myself, I'll be sitting here doing that, and I'll reach up, and I've hit my monitor a couple of times.
So the way I look behind the seat is not something a real fighter pilot would do then?
No, you do that. I'm just saying that you
okay.
can't do that without taking one of your hands off. You got to take a hand off the push off of something.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I do that I know a fighter pilot can't do is I'll just spin the seat.
I do that. That's the new old guy BFM.
I think what I need to do is actually hold the stick and just turn the whole thing around.
I'm loving that green screen attached to your seat. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask. Oh yeah, it came up the other day actually, and I think Guido, you mentioned that there are lots of ways that fighter pilots brace themselves for the Gs, and I asked. We got a lot of people here, so it's probably worth bringing up again. But was leaning your head back against the canopy something you did?
Like this?
No, as in like if you're trying to look up through the top of the canopy. Could you lean your head back against the canopy itself?
Slick sort of touched on it because what happens is you go into brake turn, you'll be looking like this, but once the G comes on, you're stuck. Like your helmet you're stuck. You're looking like this until the G comes off. So that's a lot of where a lot of neck problems come from people trying to look around. First of all, the helmet's a little bit heavy. It's pretty lightweight, the new ones are, but it's heavier than just your nugget. So there's that weight. And then if you've got a JMX, and Slick can talk to this, that's a lot heavier.
And the thing with the JHMX, just like the NBGs, you can just take those off. But with the JHMX, the other problem is that it moves the center of gravity of the helmet just slightly forward, right? And again, whatever that is times 9 when you're in a brake turn, right? And so, your neck, if you don't have your neck already set and straight, you're just going to be.
Yeah. So we do incentive rides and you have somebody riding in the back seat and you'd have to tell them it was coming, because if you rolled, pulled, and did a brake turn and they were doing anything but ready, you'd look back and you wouldn't see them anymore because they're down here.
So that's an interesting point. How would you prepare for the merge then? Because like you're saying, like we have the luxury of kind of just positioning ourselves and waiting for him to pass and look, but if you're in a real jet, you're about to pull on like 7-8 Gs there at the merge, and you say you need to be set. How are you adjusting your body position pre-merge to allow you to do that, to keep tally on him?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I came to the merge, I'd usually shift a little bit just to like, all right, here we go. I can see it coming, and then as you get very close to the merge, you've got to be on your G string before the G's come. It's no good after. If you pull and then G string, it's over. So you got to clench the butt, the legs, the thighs, the calves, because the whole point of a G string is to keep as much blood above as possible. And of course, you've got the G suit's a little different now, and there's some full body ones that change things. But when we flew, it was just the speed genes. There's a center bladder around your abdomen that pushes and helps you do that. There's bladders around your thighs and your calves and helps you do that. So you have to tighten all of that. I'm actually doing it right now. It's been a long time. It's a lot like taking a crap. You're just like a bad one. Like you got to get rid of that thing. The whole lower body is. So you're doing that. Then you're rolling. And if they're say I'm going this way, you're putting your head back and you're getting tense, and then you're pulling, and then you're straight into your G string breathing.
Yeah,
and rudder pedals too. I would bring I have kind of short legs, but I would always bring my rudder pedals far forward, and going into just before the onset of G, I would almost break the rudder pedals off because I would press so hard against them to straighten my back against the seat.
Yeah.
so that I could move my head around a little bit more. And then also the tension on your legs would help with the G strain as well.
Yeah. And so you guys were saying typically you'd go out and you'd fly three sets for BFM. I mean, you're pretty tired in the third set there, pretty wrecked.
Can be, yeah. It depends on how it went.
We used to do surge ops occasionally for training, where basically they clean off all the jets. These are fun days, but you basically fly 3 sorties, doing 3 to 4 setups a piece, and you're flying in close airspace. So in a given day, and you come back and you hot refuel. You don't even shut down. You shut down one engine, they give you more gas, and you take off and do it again. And man, by the end of one of those days, or if you're doing that for a week, because if you're doing a surge week, a lot of times you'll fly 3 days in a row, 3 sorties a day, at least 3 setups a sortie, and by the end of the week, you can't walk.
Yeah,
I can remember on like a Thursday on the last day, on say a high aspect BFM, or even a perch setup BFM, going out, and as your experience, and if you're not doing an upgrade with a guy, maybe it's just 2 guys doing CT, and on the third sortie going out and doing the pinky swear, and like, dude, we're gonna turn in for high aspect, and then we're gonna mil power rate fight the entire fight.
Yeah,
and we'll watch. And actually, it gets to what we're talking about on DCS. Mil power rate fights were kind of fun because there was enough G to make it interesting, but you could actually watch the whole thing happen. You weren't so concentrating on that, and that would be the agreement. Hey, dude, I'm done. Are you done? Like, I'm done too. Let's just do a mil power.
Circle fights on the third day.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll just go chase some clouds or something. I don't know.
I mean, that's something that crops up in DCS from time to time. And you hear the real guys come in and they say, "Oh, if you're jumping an F5, it gives you better BFM because you just don't have so much excess thrust to cover up the BFM errors." You know what I mean? So the energy management becomes big. Is that basically a similar sort of thing there, Guido?
100%. I have a buddy. He's a RAF, currently still in, and he flew Tornadoes, which are notoriously underpowered and not the greatest BFM machine that ever existed. He was one of the best BFMers, and he was new to the Eagle. He's an exchange guy, he's an RAF guy. He flew with us at Eglin. And he was a fantastic BFM pilot because he kind of was forced to learn BFM in an underpowered aircraft. And he was really, really good at Eagle BFM, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a handful for me to beat him. It was amazing.
So Dylan asks in chat there, okay, 2 questions. How long have you sustained 9G for? And have you ever seen someone shit themselves under 9G?
So, go ahead, Slick.
I'll say no to the second one. The first one, probably the longest 9G pull, was in the centrifuge. Mm-hmm. In the Eagle, when you're out training and stuff, I mean, without overgen and because remember, when you're in the jet, there's much bigger consequences to overgen when you're out there. So your sort of risk profile is a lot lower, right? I don't want to overg because now we're going home, right? And we don't get to finish the sortie. So so you're gonna practice, the sustains. But by the time you do that nice smooth G onset to make sure you don't spike it and overg, I don't know, 5 seconds ish
at the most.
You're
touching 9Gs and then you're done.
Yeah, and you'll have by then the stick is all the way in your lap, and the jet's just not going to hold 9Gs beyond that. It's going to be a good brake turn, and it's going to give you a lot of good. But
so one of the big keys there is longer. One of the big keys there is we don't do BFM below 5,000 feet. That's the lowest floor we have. So this 1,000 foot, 8.5 G, 400 rate fight stuff, we never do because we just. Does that mean it's not possible? Absolutely. I mean, if your Eagle gets down there and you're groveling on the ground fighting whatever it is, you may be in that regime. But for training wise, we simply don't go there because we're never BFMing, and usually it's a 10,000 foot floor. Usually, so you can't come close to holding 8 Gs in a sustained rate. It's more like 6.5, maybe 7 at 420 at 5,000 feet. I'd say something in that area.
Were floor busts fairly common in BFM?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's a knock it off, and technically you lost the fight, so.
Yeah. Usually during what we call floor transitions, something we don't see a lot of you guys do because ours it's interesting, and it's not because it's a bad thing. You don't really get to this position, but when we do a defensive set, whether it's 6K or 3K, these are the 2 that it usually happens on. there's some kind of vertical fight change because the offensive fighter is going to get into a gun whiz. So what we do is we'll jink, and you can do level jinks, but if you got altitude above you, the hardest problem to give the bandit if he's in a gun whiz is to take it into vertical and try to get him out of sync. So that's what we do. The problem then is, and I know you guys see this, is the floor transition. It's easy to gun a guy in a floor transition, especially if he's doing a floor save where he's flat plating. He's trying not to sink through the floor. And I know you guys see this. And that's probably the one place where I see you guys hit the floor the most, is sometimes misjudging one or the other, whether they're defensive or offensive, and scraping a guy off who's way too aggressive, or the guy who's defensive just doesn't really plan it very well and hits the ground.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles probably one of the toughest ones in that situation, just because of what happened to you that day, Guido, where you flat plated in. Like some of the other jets are better off dealing with that, but that Eagle below 200 knots just becomes like a brick. Yeah,
because it's the last great pilot's airplane. Hal doesn't have a vote. you have to fly it. Hal's not flying it. You have to actually fly the thing.
So tell us about 1212 Gaming then. How did it start? What is it? And what's your vision?
Yeah, you take this one, Guido. Start. I answer.
Okay. So it's probably 4 years ago now. We've been friends since the 12th Fighter Squadron. We've been gamers since then. We both knew that. That was almost like a secret society to admit that you were a gamer back then.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't just roll up to someone and say, "Hey, man, do you like Star Wars and gaming?" And you're a fighter pilot. You're a queer or something. I mean, not to be to use a terrible word, but I mean, seriously, that's just how it was. So anyway, we figured that out. Nerds figure that stuff out, and we were friends ever since. So we discussed a lot during our career things like this, because I'm gonna actually get more basic to where we started, because we saw training systems come and go, and a lot of times scratching our head like, what are we doing here? Why do we have this? Why don't we have this? How come we're not using some of the capabilities of gaming and now virtual reality, but then not virtual reality, but gaming and things like that? So that was always sort of a discussion, but I don't think either one of us really had in our head that was something we could try to do on a professional level as a company, potentially.
And I know a little bit of context. Just
go ahead.
Is, after I finished pilot training in '92, I was a guinea pig in a pretty high-funded experiment at Williams Air Force Base, where I got in and I flew a little mini simulator, not VR, but with Falcon 4.0, and they recorded me doing 1v1 intercepts because I was just fresh out of pilot training. And then they put me into this like $300,000 virtual reality setup with, I looked like Doc Brown in Back to the Future with all the stuff. And that always stuck with me and started a lot of the conversations that Guido's referring to of like, okay, what happened to that? Why aren't we doing that? That was awesome, right? Because in the debrief, I was in virtual reality, and they would play back the mission that I just did on a loop, but it was floating in the air in front of me, and I could walk around in it, and then it just went away, and that was in '92.
'92 with VR.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Guido finish because.
Well, I mean, so we both had our careers, and this was always something we talked about, but didn't really have a vision. And then one day, Slick actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, you got time to talk?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" And he basically said, "Hey, we should try to do something. Let's start a company and do something with gaming." And I'm like, "Something?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know, something. Let's do something." And so the initial idea was, let's make a game, because we're both retired. Let's embrace the nerd and just do it, right? And kind of the rest of it is history. And it has evolved, and there's a whole story of the evolution. I think we talked about it last time. But the long and short of it is, as we watched it, as we evolved and watched how the company was going, we realized that the gaming side could be tapped into the training side, and you could come up with something really good. Like you could tap into this capability that you could expand training into spaces that it didn't exist before, or it was difficult to leverage before this time. And that, in fact, gamers were already being trained by these devices how to play these games. I tell a story about my son who, plays games like any kid does. He has a phone, and he had hunting games. I took him hunting. I'll make this real short. I've told Slick this 100 times. And we're up in this stand and we're talking about hunting. It's deer. And I'm telling him, all right, here's the gun. He'd never really shot one very much. So we're pointing it. I'm showing him how to aim. And then I'm discussing if a deer shows up, which one didn't, but if a deer shows up, you have two choices on where to shoot it. You can shoot it in the head. And I said, I don't recommend that. It's a hard shot and it's not really great. And I said, and he goes, you shoot him in the shoulder. And I went, how do you know that? He said, well, geez, Dad, I've played thousands of hunting games. He had so many repetitions that was conceptual and procedural knowledge in the kid's head that a game gave him.
Yeah.
Right. Did that make him the great white hunter? No. Did that give him a piece of information that I didn't have to go over anymore, that he inherently understood already? Yes. Yeah. And that was kind of the idea of it here, that you can create games, and they can be quite serious subjects, that will help people get concepts and procedures down in a much more solidified way. So when they show up to the instructor or the instructor pilot or whatever it is you're doing, really any technical thing you can do this with, they have a better idea of what it is that they're doing conceptually and potentially even in 3D space, which is kind of the area that VR can do that we couldn't do before.
Yeah, simulators are an attempt to do a lot of that as well. And so when we started walking down this road, it was like, well, let's take that a step further. And because Guido and I are gamers, we understand the potential value. And like we talked about yesterday, we didn't have the social stigma that you get from a lot of fighter pilots of, learning things when you're not in the real airplane, because that's just always been a contentious thing in the community about, oh, you got to go do it in the jet, which yeah, absolutely. We're not debating that. We're just saying maybe when you go do it in the jet, you get more out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that we saw that in the interview with the head of ED. They said they've had quite a few Air Forces come to them and say that new pilots who are going through the system who grew up with DCS simply have better SA when they get taught BVR, and it makes sense, right?
Absolutely. And I don't know if he's still here or if he came by, but we talked yesterday a little bit about my buddy Dingo, who's a controller, who is a much better controller for having played DCS and practicing at home controlling in a very dynamic. He's using the Hoggett server, and there's a lot of crap going on in the Hoggett server. And he would sit there and control and practice control in a 3D space, and it made him better. It just did. When we did a mission, it was almost easy for him as far as conceptually, because he'd controlled yesterday at home 50 airplanes flying around.
Yeah.
Now he's got a 4-ship and there's 8 bandits, and he's like, yep, there.
Yeah. So Captain Puffington asks, "Hey guys, awesome interview. Amazing how far air combat has come since World War II. Where do you see it going in 50+ years?"
I see some comments down below that talking about remote and all that. I think that evolution is obviously here already with drones and whatnot. I think how that ends up happening, I'm not sure you really know, because Guido said it yesterday. The enemy gets a vote, right? And we often don't give that enough thought when we're just kind of spitballing about what's the future look like, right? So if I make everything remote, and now all the enemy has to do is go target that link so that I can't talk to any of my airplanes, right? Then, I've just made it easier for them, potentially, right?
Yeah.
If I have a bunch of independent entities in airplanes that, can continue to fight when things get really, really bad, right? That gives me an advantage. So where it's going to go with the technology and all that it's easy to project that out from what we can do, like what's possible, but what becomes tactically and operationally viable.
Yeah.
I mean, fighter data link, for example, we were talking about that earlier, that's been around since the 70s, right? And only in the last probably 5-6 years did it get mature enough that guys rely on it.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a networked battle space. How it looks, how the networked battle space looks, where the humans exist in the chain, that's the question, And when you look at DCS and you're remotely flying an airplane, obviously you're in virtual space, but the same concept applies. If there was some way for you to control that physical airplane from your desk in wherever that battle space is. Virtual pilots doing what you guys do could be part of the picture. There could be a human or two nearby, because EM is EM. It can be jammed. If the satellites don't work and you've got to do it locally with the guy there in an airplane, maybe he's got 4 little airplanes around that are piloted by guys like DCS pilots and him. And then if something goes on, there's so many options, and that's the question on really where it's going. But it will, I think we can say without a shadow of a doubt that it will be a networked battle space. I like to talk a little bit when we talk about this kind of subject about the newest Battlestar Galactica movie. Now, you guys are familiar with that, but the Cylons obviously attack the humans and their computers. And the updated version of it, now we have viruses and things like that. We kind of understand that idea, which didn't really exist in the early one in the 80s, not as mature. The new Vipers, they stopped using because the Cylons put a virus in it. They go back to the old Viper fighter because it's more analog and it's not in the network. So It becomes a more useful fighter. So there's a lot of that kind of thinking going on, and it's a great question, and it's going to be network somehow, but how is the actual.
And so what do you think? I mean, this is how long is a piece of string type question, but do you think that they will start phasing pilots out of fighters, and how far away is that, do you think?
I don't see it happening. I was just answering some other questions. I don't see it happening while I'm alive. I think you're going to see less. I mean, if you look, there's lots of like graphics out there that show like the number of airplanes that it took in World War II to inflict the same amount of damage as what you have now, right? It was like, hundreds of airplanes, and now you're down to like one B-2 bomber, right? And so it's not. I don't see the human exiting the kill chain. I see them, I just see them being less of them required. And some people are talking here, sure, I can have a remote wingman, so that I'm still there physically in the battle space. I think all that stuff's being explored, right? I mean, it takes an internet search or two to see all the different ideas out there.
So two things on that. One thing is really interesting. There's a story that went around the Air Force and the fighter community, and it was a friend of mine that told me, and I don't know if he was there, and Slick may remember this, but there was a time when the remote vehicles were kind of new to the AOR in Iraq and those areas. So they were a valuable asset because they could go and do things that piloted vehicles couldn't do. But they were quite valuable, and that lots of different people were fighting over getting their services. And when there was bad weather, they wouldn't fly. And he said in the KAOC where Slick was working, oftentimes they would have the feed for the remotely piloted vehicles, but if it was sitting in the hangar, it would just be the feed of it sitting in the hangar. And my buddy said people would watch that, like, hey, is the RPV going to go do something? They're sitting on the floor watching the RPV sit in the hangar. That it was like moths to a flame.
Yeah,
that thing, and it became this deal where these vehicles were so valuable that they weren't risked in certain cases where theoretically that's why they were built, to be risked without a human in it. So how expensive are these vehicles? What's their mission? How many do you have? Just because it's remotely piloted doesn't mean that all of a sudden you don't worry about the risk with it. Yeah. So that's one interesting thing about that. And I'm with Slick. We're not going away anytime soon, but I think our world's going to change, and there may be some of us that are sitting at our desks doing it.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I remember that going into the KAOC in the Middle East, and they're like popcorn on screen 3, and everyone looks at screen 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, it brings us on to this fight with Sungho and AI Falco. What do you think is going to happen there?
Wow. I think he's going to try to trick the AI. I don't know if that's the right word. I think going after the fact that the AI is kind of a pre-made decision model, like we talked about yesterday. Again, that you're looking for the weakness. If the weakness is it can't deal with something it's never seen, and again, now that's just a matter of, has it seen everything in these thousands or millions of scenarios that it's gone through? I don't know. Maybe it has, but I don't know. I see him maybe trying to do that. I did hear him talking about that he was observing the AI pretty closely in the other tapes, and he had a few things that he suspected the AI was doing weird, and I think he was suggesting that he was going to go after what he considered
Yeah.
those weaknesses to be.
Yeah, because I spoke to Supersonic Banana about this last night again, and I mentioned your comment, Slick, that Ace said, well, when I saw Banger do this, or what looked to be a BFM error, I saw AI Falco also make a BFM error to compensate. And Supersonic Banana immediately said to me, "Well, what makes you think that Falco was making a BFM error, or made Ace, in Ace's opinion, AI Falco made a BFM error? But remember, AI Falco has flown millions, like orders of magnitude more BFM than Ace has. So what
Sure.
looks to Ace to be a BFM error is maybe just a good continuation for AI Falco. So
That's a great point, because Guido's talked about this a lot when, our experience coming into this community of, what constitutes an error, right? Because, I could come in here and, I still have a little trouble controlling the airplane, but I could come in here and fly perfect Eagle BFM like I used to in the jet and still get my ass kicked,
yeah,
right? Because what perfect Eagle BFM in the real jet, I don't have all the same habit patterns and
Yeah.
things I'm thinking about. So, what I might consider an error when I first come into a community like this doesn't matter because I'm dead.
yeah.
They
Right.
go, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, but you're dead and I'm not.
Yeah. Results matter. Results matter. I mean, I think Sung Ho. I think the best. First of all, the cards are stacked. So let's not get too crazy about the AI is taking over the world and Skynet's about to
Yeah.
make fighter pilots go away, because number one, the Falco has, they called it perfect state information. It's not perfect, but it does know exactly where in this programmed space the other fighter is. It's being fed a lot of data that in the real world it would have to get through some kind of sensor. So that info would have to come somehow, and that wouldn't be nearly as perfect as being just fed exactly all the orientations that the other guy is. So that's against him. Number two, he's going to be flying in X-plane or whatever it is. That's negative to him because he's really good in DCS. I think he's a good enough gamer. That's not going to hurt too much, and he's going to get some practice. So that's good.
Now
But
let's flip that coin on its head for a second and say if we took some of the strongest BFMers from the clinic and we threw them up against current F-15C line pilots in an F-15C sim, like a real sim, what would you expect would happen after the DCS BFMers got past the interface issues, the switchology, how to pull up the ACM modes? What would you expect would happen in that scenario?
well, I think they would do just fine. All the assumptions would have to be ironed out on something like that, because going back to what Slick said, some of our assumptions, he and I's assumptions about real world BFM is we're always worried about missiles, which if you're doing just guns only, that changes things a little bit. And it goes on from there. There's a lot of examples. However, if once you got those guys there and you said, look, you got to stay within the G limits, you can't over G, give them a little idea of that kind of stuff. Like you said, here's the ACM modes. Here's how to handle all that stuff. Give them, a few days practice of just going over and over. I have no doubt as gamers, they're going to do just fine, if not be potentially better. Because you're talking about guys, Slick and I get in games and play games, and now we're doing DCS. So I'm probably actually a better BFMer than I was, to be quite honest, right now. I have more BFM experience. If you put me in an F-15 and we get rid of, if we go back to the G limits and we don't do these 12G things, I'm going to compete a lot better than I am otherwise. But I'm getting better at what we're doing in DCS too, because I can learn, and I'm like, okay, I got it. There's some different things we can do. So to your question, I think they would do just fine.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. All right, so
Hey, dude, I'm an old fighter pilot, and I have about a 1.0 bladder. Can we take
absolutely, yeah. Let's do that. Let's take a quick
All right,
break here.
all right,
so-
guys. Sorry about that. Give me a second.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. So we got fresh drinks, been to the bathroom, ready to go again. We had a question from Shifty Mover right after we left there. He said, may have missed it, LB, have either of you guys had the chance to BFM Red Air, i.e. an Su-27 or a MiG-29?
Not in real life, no.
No?
No, there was a program recently unclassified. There's books on it now for the Red Air aircraft that were out by Nellis. You can get the book. I have it somewhere around here, actually, signed by the guy that wrote it. I can't remember what it was called, but Red Eagle or something like that. But you can read about that. They turned that off a while ago. If anything's going on now, I wouldn't be able to talk about it, and two, I have no idea anyway. So
Yeah.
no idea. We were discussing though. We do know some people who did exchanges with the German Air Force when they reunified, and the Eastern German Air Force brought some MiGs over for a while into the unified Germany. They flew MiGs for a bit, and then Malaysian MiGs. Also, some of our friends flew against Malaysian MiGs, MiG-29s, but I never had opportunity to go down there. I was actually leaving Kadena when that squadron went down to do that.
Yeah, okay.
Close to games, I got to see one up close and sort of crawl over it, but that was it.
Yeah, but for those guys that don't know, the Russian way or the Red Air way of thinking is very different to Western thinking, isn't it? Their whole doctrine, really. Can you guys maybe expand on that a little bit?
It was. I
Yeah.
think it's a lot closer to us now. The old style was very GCI centric. In fact, their aircraft typically were designed with a switch that would basically allow the GCI to control the airplane, or at the very least shoot the missile.
Yeah.
The pilot was just there to take off and land, essentially. So they're very hidebound in their GCI, but I think that's kind of old school. They've opened up their aperture, and I think they're a lot better at more what we would consider more westernized air-to-air combat. So I would not count on that.
Well, what's interesting about that point, Guido, is kind of related to the discussion that was being had earlier about the remote piloting and the AI and all that, and I don't think we really know, because again, they did that for many years where it was kind of the remote person had more control than the person in the cockpit, and it wasn't effective. And so it could be technological, it could be procedural, who knows. But
well, there's that joke about the Soviet bloc guy saying, it's American doctrine is really interesting, and it would be very, very useful to us if any Americans ever followed it. So they're like, you don't know what these people are going to do. They have doctrine, but don't count on them following it.
But what's interesting about that is I would actually argue, yes, we do have, and we call it doctrine, but the way that we actually then articulate that down to the tactical level is it's more like it's guidelines. It's sort of guardrails more than anything, and we recognize. And again, this goes back to the previous discussion. I think that's always been the strength, is the recognition that you cannot proceduralize things like that, and that some of that decision making, maybe AI will get there, but the problem is, every time you go into something for real, there's going to be situations that nobody ever thought of this. So you're transferring a solution from something that you do know to something you've never seen before.
There's a much larger discussion, metaphysical discussion, about whether you do take humans out of the kill chain.
Yeah,
I mean that's kind of,
that's not going to happen while we're alive.
Yeah, but I mean that's the ethical, religious kind of idea of how much killing automation are we going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has occurred to me, during my time flying DCS, and I'm sure it's occurred to some of these other guys as well, is, the lethality of the real world compared to DCS. Like we don't have the S-400 in DCS, for example. There are certain things out there that make that battle space very scary, I think. And, we have a degree of that in DCS, but, would I want to enter a heat emerge in real life? Man, that shit terrifies me. Like that would...
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you have to remember too, and again, just talking about missiles and all that is, nobody wants to get hit by a missile, but it's also not exactly like what you see in the movies, and you see the the Top Gun movie, and the missile goes up to the guy, and there's this giant explosion, and it just disintegrates the airplane. That's not generally the thing. It's a small explosion with lots of metal pieces breaking hydraulic lines. And pieces of your airplane are going to fall off, and if something goes through the cockpit and goes through your pink body, then that's bad too. But, but it's not as grandiose as the movies often show.
One AIM-9 just evaporates you basically. Yeah,
exactly.
Or where the airplane turns and the AIM-9 turns, and then it just
chases them.
What was that movie? The one where he had two Sams chasing him for like about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about Pilot X. We've got this comp coming up. There's a lot of people in chat who may not have heard of it. So the BFM ACM clinic is going to run a new format of competition. We're calling it Pilot X versus the world. And what it is, we take, it's basically like harking back to gladiator times, where you took your champion, you threw him in a ring with lions, and you see how they went, and that's what we're doing here. So the first Pilot X is going to be Play School. He recently won a BFM competition within the clinic, and he's going to be taking on 10 pilots from the BFM clinic in 1v2 ACM. And so what happens is, in the order that they registered, the Team World pilots will spawn into a two-ship that's sitting in the middle of a 10-mile diameter circle facing south. And they're line abreast at about a mile at Mark 0.8, 15,000 feet. And all they've got is guns. And once they start flying, Pilot X then chooses his jet at any one of 4 points on a cardinal facing in at them. And he can choose whichever jet he wants. And the twist is that he's carried 2 Fox 2s. So, pretty much as soon as Pilot X jumps into his jet, it's fights on, and all hell breaks loose. And man, we ran some tests of this, and you can't tell what's gonna happen. We pumped a bunch of guys through that Pilot X jet, and it's just chaos, man. Neither side is appealing to be on, but Let's talk about it from a real world perspective, because you guys have this thing called Tap the Cap. Is that right? Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Guido.
Okay. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but the concept is that we have gone through a dirty merge. We didn't get all the bandits, and a guy shows up. So we're trying to get our two ship back together, get our comm, get our visual lookout, get our radars looking in the right place, and then we find a guy, just like you're talking about. He comes from whichever direction. And then from there, you've got to maneuver to defeat any shots that guy has. This is closer to what we do because the bandit has some heaters. Typically, we would have heaters too. That changes things a little bit. There's a couple ways to do it. One is visual perch ACM. He's always behind us. The other one is what we're talking about, coming from any direction, but typically a little further away. This works for DCS though, based on what's going on. And from there, it's teamwork. It's how does the two ship maneuver to survive and kill the bandit at the same time? How do they not hit each other? What does the comm sound like? How do they know who's engaged, who's support, and basically survive the merge and kill the bandit as fast as possible so that you can get out of there? Because also, if you're in a merge, you're probably relatively low on fuel and you're interested in getting rid of the guy so you can go home. Because one thing we don't deal with in DCS a lot, unless you do like a Hogget server or a no-kid mission, you still got to have the gas at the end to land somewhere. And that may be 100 miles away. So you don't want to use all your gas swirling, kill that guy, or disengage, get the hell out. But this is tournament stuff, so we're gonna swirl until somebody dies, which is cool too.
Yeah, and it's funny, because the permutations that are possible in this are just crazy. And what struck us was that the jet that you would think would be most unappealing for Pilot X to spawn in actually proved the most effective in the brief testing that we've done, because if he spawns in the head-on jet with the two ship, so he spawns to the south facing them. They're facing south, right? So if he spawns south, head on against them with 2 Fox 2s, the distance is so short and the closure rate is so high that as soon as that Fox 2 comes off the rail, they simply don't really have much time to get their airplane out of the way. Because they basically spawn in and all of a sudden they've got a Fox 2 in their face. Man, it's a pretty rough deal, But there's so much to talk about here because, the other thing we found was And I think you mentioned the other night, Guido, and Slick you as well, that you have had this situation in real life where a guy dispatches with the first guy rather quickly, and now he finds himself in a 1v1. He's got a Fox 2 on his aeroplane, and he's getting caught up in this on the fence kind of mentality about, well, this happens at DCS anyway, and I'll let you guys talk about how you deal with that in real life. But, do I commit to the guns only fight here? I'm tangled up with this guy one-on-one guns right now. I've got a Fox 2 on my jet. Or do I maybe spend a bit more energy and try and get the Fox 2 off the rail and kill him? And Guido, you want to, or Slick, either of you guys, you want to touch on what the mentality is in the real world to keep you on the rails with that?
I'm trying to think of what the question is in there. I mean, are you going to keep I'm not going to keep a missile on the rail.
No, well, what I meant to say is Guido mentioned the other day that you fight your best BFM on the way to the next WES.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you're fighting good BFM, then and we talked about control zone BFM, and if you're fighting control zone BFM, then you're going to try to get yourself. It's like you're flying to a heater WES and then transitioning to the gun.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're going to get to the heater WES, and if the other person is doing something that is making you not be able to get a good track, they've got flares, they've gone to idle, or your missile's just not hacking it that day, or you're a little too close, a little too many angles, you're inside min range, whatever, then you're going to transition to guns. But you're not going to fly through a perfectly good WES and leave a missile sitting on the rail. At least I wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think your Sukhoi pilots, and I know Play School did that, and you guys did that a little bit while you're practicing. I think they're not going to have much problem flying good BFM because that missile it's there. It's
You're
hard.
Talking about the R-73?
Yeah.
That thing's scary.
So I don't see that one being a problem. Some of the less capable missiles potentially could cause you to bite off on trying to get a missile shot, and it's not great BFM. So I think the mentality would be fly your best guns BFM to the control zone, to a gun WES, however you want to look at it. And I guess I'm going to caveat that a little bit because I keep saying control zone. There are high angle gunshots that we do in DCS. So just fly your best 1v1 BFM, and if there's a missile shot in there, take it, but don't glom off on that too long and keep working to the gun WES. And I think that's what Play School is going to do from Pilot X perspective. If he's got a shot, he'll take it. I don't think you try to pork away any guns BFM trying to get a missile shot just because you have it. But again, that being said, it depends, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What if he extends and goes away and comes back in and shoots, gets a shot unseen? There's other options.
Absolutely. Yep. Now, there's some terminology that we should go over that you guys use in real life that may help people as they prepare for this comp. Now, the 4 terms I've got here: no joy, blind, tally, and visual. Did you want to run over those, Slick?
Yeah, sure. So tally or no joy is when you're talking about the bad guy. Blind and visual is when you're talking about your wingman or your flight lead. And I think you go into you kind of go into an engagement where number 2, well, both actually, it's assumed that you're visual unless you say otherwise. Right. And I don't know, Guido, what would you say? It's just, it's assumed that you don't see the bad guy unless you call it.
Right.
And so, being specific, right? And comm and ACM is you always directive first, right? So the first thing out of your mouth should be directive. So if I see something, if I'm doing a good visual lookout and I see somebody show up at my flight lead 6 who hasn't spiked us on the RWR, right? The first thing out of my mouth is break left or break right or whatever right. It's directive, then descriptive. So I'm going to get the jets moving, going to get everybody defending themselves, flaring. And then we have to sort it out. So again, you're going to make some of those assumptions going in. And when I tell, if I were Guido's wingman and I said, hey, break left, I'm going to give him a second to do that. He's going to pop out a couple of flares. I'm going to break with him. I'm going to keep my eye on the bandit because I see them. And then I'm going to talk his eyes on to them so that we both see them.
Yeah.
All right. You break left, bandit, you're, left, whatever. 3,000 feet low, high, and then I should hear out of him almost immediately if I did a good job of it is tally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One's engaged, and as soon as I hear that, now I can assume that support role, which I already kind of am by default because I'm the one that called the brake turn.
Yeah. Now, something we see happen in ACM. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just to say the contracts are really important, and you can almost make up whatever contract you want, but you have to have a contract so that unless you hear otherwise, here's the situation.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought up this this point of contracts. So engaged and support fighter, because sometimes we see in ACM and DCS, there's not a great deal of discipline here, and you can have a guy on the Bandit 6, and then all of a sudden his wing drops in between him and the Bandit for the kill, and this guy who was the engaged fighter nearly shits himself. Did you want to touch on that?
Me off.
So that's actually really cool. And in real combat, if you read any kind of World War II, Korean War kind of stuff, where you get these larger air battles, especially World War II, where there's just airplanes all over the place. One of the reasons that the whole wingman concept started, and really it started in World War One. Early on you had Oswald Bulk and some of the lone wolves, and they were very good pilots. They'd go out and they flew alone. Dawn Patrol, he's out there, the lone wolf. But pretty quickly, you learned that the guys alone were getting killed because people were teaming up. So then we started to get the wingman concept and the whole idea of what the wingman's job is. And the wingman's job was to keep somebody from rolling in on his flight lead 6. And then they both would help each other with the same thing. So bring that into the modern day with what we're doing here with Pilot X. And you got the engaged support role where one guy's fighting, the other guy's supporting. The way I always brief it, and we talked about it yesterday, was as the engaged fighter, your job is to kill or survive if you're defensive. As the support fighter, your job is to kill, period, dot, unless your plan to kill him involves hitting me. Get a new plan. It sucks. Yeah. And how we do that in DCS is kind of interesting because, and I don't know how you can do the comm, but I'm assuming people will be in a Discord channel. So you can have more of a conversation at 1G about this. You don't have to be militant about, all right, I say engage, you say tally. You can do that. That's a good way to do it. But you could actually have more of a conversation. You see, yeah, I see him. Okay, well, yeah, there. Hey, I'm going to go out. Whatever. You can discuss. So as long as there's some kind of coordination between the two of you, I think it would be interesting if you force people to use DCS SRS, where they had to actually transmit, and then radio time becomes important. And it's a finite source.
Yeah, and if you step on each other, and that's why the discipline and the radio contracts are so important too. All right, the contract of your status is important because that minimizes the comm on the radio. Because if I click my radio and he's talking to me, I'm not hearing him.
Yeah.
Right? So if I am talking out of turn, right, and my flight lead's telling me to do something, I'm not going to hear it.
Yeah, I agree. It is a great idea, and it would be worthwhile doing if it weren't for the fact that Blue Air, as in the Team World pilots, can literally spawn in anything. So you could have one guy in a flanker and one guy in Mirage, and the flanker isn't going to be able to tune up 30500 to talk to him. So
yeah, I mean, there's technical limitations. Yeah, absolutely, it would be. But being able, like we're doing here, to have a conversation and maybe step, and then the other guy, oh, he's talking. Okay, that's not. We don't have that real world. It's all radios, and that's why we call clear, concise, correct comm. And that as well. Low blow, you flew. So in aviation, you try to get out the information as quickly and as concisely as possible. Get off the radio, and then somebody else can use the radio.
Yeah. Now, something I'd really like to talk with you guys about, and this would be great for the people in chat who are, maybe new to ACM, or even guys who aren't new to ACM, but just to hear it from two Eagle drivers about how you guys determine who's who in the zoo. Do you want to maybe go through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you'll see this in DCS because you guys well know this, when someone gets to, and it depends on your rig a little bit and in which headset you're using, everything else, but somebody gets a mile and a half, 2 miles away, they're a pixel, right? Or a couple pixels. It's hard to tell who they are. So if you lose track of which one's your wingman and which one's the bandit, and you look out there and you see two guys, you're trying to re-enter a fight. Like say, Slick and I are flying, the bandit is on me, I'm defensive, I'm defending against him, and Slick extends a little bit to come back in and get a good entry. And he's looking at this thinking, oh crap, which one is it? It will be presented in a question to your wingman. So something like, if he's, Gonzo 2, he'll say Gonzo 1, high man, low man. And I'm to answer based on whether I'm the high man or low man. If sometimes you can be more clear, high man, left turn descending, because I ran into that flying sometimes too. You'll get guys into a tree, and he's kind of a high man, but now he's pirouetting or something, and by the time the radio call comes out, it's this, and now the wingman's shooting the wrong guy because you said high man, right? High man, and then here comes the wingman's fox 2 into you going low. Fratricide, by the way, is obviously bad juju.
Yeah,
and in the game we get to kind of laugh it off. We took that unbelievably seriously in training, because shooting your own buddy in real life, if it came down to it, we were practicing to not do that. So if in practice we did that was bad, and it was not a good feeling. It was not a good feeling at all.
You would get shamed by everybody in the squadron for a long period of time if you committed fratricide during a training mission. And in the bar on Friday night, you would just get destroyed.
Yeah.
And you would laugh, kind of, but it really wasn't funny. You know what I mean? I don't want to.
We had to take it seriously, because I've actually seen where flight lead made a guy call the other guy's wife.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know I killed your husband in training today.
But it's worth mentioning it, because maybe not in the concept of Pilot X, because the only person who has Fox 2s in Pilot X is Pilot X. But for the 2 ship, I mean, if they did have Fox 2s, and as you say, there's a free fighter there or a support fighter trying to back up his friend, you'd have to think fairly carefully about throwing a Fox 2 into the mix, wouldn't you? If he's back there in a guns whiz. Because there is a chance that Fox 2 could just bite onto him instead of the Bandit, right?
Yeah, we have deconfliction rules, and I can't get into what they are, but there's specific distances and things of when you can shoot and when you can't shoot. And if you take a shot without what we call weapons deconfliction, then that was a debriefable item. And we talk a long time about, hey, how could you enter this fight maybe better, or wait a little longer, or use a different weapon, or whatever, so that you didn't have a possibility of that happening. And while that wasn't considered a frat, it was a foul.
Yeah. Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got 4 spots left. You guys going to fly in this comp?
Yeah, I'm trying to get Slick to do it, man.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. Like I said, man, I'm still figuring out how to fly the airplane in DCS, but it should be fun. We'll get in there.
Yeah.
Somebody asked earlier about HOTAS for the Eagle. My answer on that is it kind of depends. I mean, I have a Thrustmaster. I'm a kind of a caveman doing this thing right here. You guys have some awesome rigs. A couple of you guys have. I know a lot of you have that 810 stick that's very close. Where I set the stuff up on my HOTAS, I tried to make it more or less Eagle-ish, so it made sense of what thing I was doing on which stick and handle. I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. I guess I could show people my setup for. But most of what I was worried about was the BVR stuff. I set up the auto axe and what you call the ACM modes to make it kind of feel like the Eagle on one of my buttons.
Yeah.
The rest of it, though, I had to really kind of get creative with how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still setting my stick up, but the important thing that when I kind of download, I have a X-55, and when I downloaded like a profile off the internet, I mean, switches were all over the place. So for me, I've been going back through and just like Guido was saying, getting into different radar modes, talking on the radio, weapon selecting, and shooting. Everything else is kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll put that on some switch, but those are like the basic.
Yeah.
And so when you're in VR, because doing the whole lift your thing and trying to hit a key, and which key was it to switch weapons between the one, that I just can't deal with that.
Yeah.
So I've been going through and programming my my stick to handle those basic functions. So
yeah,
BFMing you guys has helped me with the auto axe, though. I got that down pretty good, and now it's actually muscle memory because I did enough BFM for what does vert scan, guns, bore sight, reject, block. That stuff I got down, and that really helped out. Now that I'm adding the BVR pieces, that stuff's in there, and that's what we talked about earlier about practicing something virtually. I got that down.
Now they say the best laid plan won't survive first contact with the enemy, but you guys jump into those jets against Play School here, and he spawns in your 6, and there's a Fox 2 in the air. What's your plan? Talk us through how you're going to deal with it.
All right, so he's probably going to be on one side or the other, or at least appear to be. The ideal thing is to break into him, so it's going to be eagle flight, break right,
Yep.
depending on which one of us sees it. We're going to break with flares because that's common sense. What you do with your power, I think you can use common sense there. What airspeed do you spawn in at?
0.8.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's problematic. Because a break at 0.8 is going to leave you, especially in DCS, with no knots real quick.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't know if an idle break is really a good idea. That's a hard one. Anyway, we're going to break. We're going to go through some kind of comm, and it may be for us because we're rusty. Do you see him? Something like that. Where the hell is he? I don't know. But we'll probably try to do engage support. And I think it'll be something like that. And wherever guy he goes after is going to call engaged.
Yeah.
And once we're television, we're going to say it, and someone's going to try to get an entry. Something we didn't talk about too much yet is on ACM for us, real world wise, we talk a lot about how we re-enter the fight. How is the fastest way to re-enter the fight? And it's the one place where in our training we do a lot of vertical re-entries that you guys actually do quite a bit across the circle.
Yeah.
Because that's the fastest way using God's G to bring your nose back around.
Totally.
Lots of vert scan to get that guy locked up, and then we would get into weapons deconfliction, but not here because it's guns only. So that's going to be different for Slick and I. Somebody's going to be trying to get into a guns wes somehow, and I feel like obviously someone's defensive, and the trick for us is going to be the engaged fighter trying to survive against play school, gunning the shit out of us angle. That's going to be hard. We may very well find one of us gone before we even re-enter the fight.
Or could it be as simple as just using the thrust to weight ratio of the eagle to drag him out, and then the other guy just falls into his 6 and tries to run him down, basically.
That's true, because I guess
I think a big thing in this one, probably also going to be Guido, is getting him looking out both sides of the jet.
Yeah, you know what? So Slick, and here's what I sort of missed, and now I'm thinking about it. What I just described is going to be like a 1 mile and a half guy. He's at 5 miles, so that changes things. We don't need to break back into him necessarily.
Oh.
So I saw some pictures that Lobo put up there. One of them was you could break away, kind of force play school to pick one.
Yeah.
And then the other one on an entry, what Lobo just said, just blast away and then come around with a little bit more room between us. That's a possibility.
Well, I think another thing, I don't know if we are comfortable enough with the RWR, right? Because if he's 5 miles at our 6, right, typically one of us is going to be spiked.
Well, the thing with DCS is it's going to show up on both of us. Whenever the radar's like anywhere near you, it's going to
Right?
The range is
who's spiked.
Yeah.
The range will be 5 miles. We'll know that. Now, whether or not we can stroke it up and he runs us down or we can pull away, I don't know.
No, that is something worth mentioning, because if he spawns in a Western jet, it'll spawn with as default with his radar on, so you guys will get the little blip on the RWR. But if he spawns in a flanker or a fulcrum, that should only spawn with EO on, no radar.
Oh.
Yeah, and he's carrying R73s.
That's going to be hard, dude. I mean, if you can't know where he is until he spikes you. Now that's true cap to tap, though, because if he's not head on with your radar, now what we would do is we would actually have a synchronized look ahead of us to try to find him if he's ahead of us. If he's to the side, that was all visual lookout. And we had that, sometimes we brief you. Most of the time we brief you had to have a radar lock on someone. Otherwise, it was a lot of unobserved entries. But usually towards the end of the mission, or if it was a higher level kind of mission, we would say, all right, the bandit, we tell them cleared weird or have some code. Now we can come in with a no lock attack, and that's much harder because you're relying on visual lookout to pick, or maybe a missile in this case. Does the R73 smoke at all?
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was just about to mention. If you look out to your left and you see something about 5 miles that looks like it's flaring, it's probably not flares.
That's right.
Now you're BFM in the missile.
Well, in that case, it'd be break left or break right, missile in the air. Break right, flare, missile in the air. Left 9 o'clock high or something like that to get the other guy's eyes on, and then you're looking to see who it's tracking. So once you start going, is it pointing at? Is it coming at you, or is line of sight going somewhere else Oh, good, it's slick. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I mean, the general flow is going to be try whatever you can. You have to survive that initial attack.
Yeah.
Right? Survive the initial attack, and then try to get yourself to where both of you are tally visual. Right? Force the bandit to pick one, and if you can force him to pick one, and further force him to look out both, like I said, both sides of his jet, so that he can't keep track of both of you at the same time. Now you're going to have some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. But super interesting format. And the fact that you guys don't have Fox 2s and he does really, you know, like I said, the best way to put it is that it's unappealing being on both sides of the fence. Because if you guys decide to drag him out and then the other one falls into his 6, he's not exactly having a fun time either, you know. I mean, he's got an eagle behind him. So
Yeah, you know what? That's true. I mean, what if Pilot X locks a guy and the other one just split S's back,
right?
And goes looking for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's an option. And if Play School doesn't have visual on it or isn't able to kind of track that, and if he loses the one guy who's spun back to get to him, that changes everything.
Yeah, I think they are Supersonic Banana. I think there's a chance that Guido and Slick are going to sign up for this.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, we probably will. It might be comical, but
yeah, it'll be a slaughter, but we'll give it a shot.
He's got Godo. He's got 2 Fox 2s. So if he's in a Western jet, he has 9Ms. If he's in a Russian jet, he has the R-73 Archer, and if he's in a Mirage, he's got the Magic. And that Magic, let me tell you, that Magic's no joke. That thing is a maneuverable little Fox 2, man. Yeah, scary.
Yeah, that's what that thing's known for. Is it's actually a lot of G on that thing.
Yeah,
sounds like it's going to be a pretty tough scenario.
Yeah.
And I think, like Guido was just talking about, you could do some kind of maybe unorthodox tactic, and that's the thing I'm going to have to try to figure out this week is being able to get, put my radars and my radar in the right mode and all that without having to lift my VR headsets. That would be a little bit of a process of me learning how to, because you could split us around, invert scan, and kind of put your nose where you think he is, and hopefully have somebody get a lock and come up from the depths while he's chasing the other guy. There's lots of
man. Yeah. I cannot wait to commentate this with Guido and Slick. I hope. If you want, you can join us, dude, to commentate. We can commentate this, the 3 of us. It's going to be a good time. So that'll be the day after we run the comp, and the funny part about that is I signed up to flying this as well with Supersonic Banana, so we'll be commentating some of our own fights there. Should be pretty funny.
Yeah, we can debrief our own buffoonery. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I've got to ask you guys real quick.
ACM practice, huh?
I've got to ask you, what do you miss about flying the Eagle the most?
2 things: the people and the jet. I miss nothing as far as the queep and the crap around it, and any non-flying military shenanigans and the hut and all that stuff. I mean, I loved it while I was doing it. I don't miss it, but I miss the people and I miss flying the jet.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the same as Guido. The doing a long day. If I'm in the squadron early and I'm setting up the briefing and I'm leading a mission and I'm doing all that I loved it. Even though it's a lot of work and it can be kind of exhausting, going out and flying those missions. Like a Friday, where you're leading a mission in the morning, and then by 4:00 in the afternoon, somebody's up doing a talk about a weapon system, and you're listening to that, and you're having a beer, and then you're spending the night just telling stories in the bar. There is no replacement for that.
Yeah, and that's what Roundabout just said in chat as well. The esprit de corps.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you, like Slick said, you're in at 4:30 in the morning putting boards up. You're briefing for an hour. You take off at 6:30. You land at 7:30. You debrief to 10. It's 10 in the morning, and you're exhausted, and now you're off to the tower, and you're soft, and then you have weapons talk at 4 in the afternoon. I mean, it's just it's a crazy life, but it's a lot of fun.
Yep. Gordo's just asked you there, were you an Eglin, Langley, Mountain Home, or PAC AF, or USAF E Eagle drivers?
I was Kadena, Eglin, and Tyndall Flying Eagles.
Yeah, I was Kadena, Tyndall, and Langley Flying Eagles.
There you go, Gordo. Now, I've got a few other questions that have come from the community in this list here. Crips asked, what are some of the things that DCS is lacking in terms of realism? So that maybe we can answer that one first.
That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one because
it's a little bit of the. It's just it's a little bit of the response stuff, but I think some of that's configurable. And like I was saying earlier, I'm working on getting my joystick calibrated right and all that. So some of it is not DCS; it's the way you interact with it. It's some of the hardware. And I've said this before. If I load up just for fun, I'll do it sometimes just to kind of practice flying. Load up like the Nevada ranges and just go down and do some canyon flying and all that. And when you're doing that, I mean, it feels like you're actually hitting the eagle doing it. It's pretty damn.
Yeah.
Where I lose it is, and again, this is configurable, and I'm trying to work on this. I have these habit patterns of like, oh, I know I want to go into auto guns and I want to slew it to the lower left corner because I know there's somebody over there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to do that.
Yep.
That's because it doesn't do that.
Well, exactly. And those things of I don't have the level of control over the systems on the airplane that I would in real life. And so there's this I don't know what you'd call it, cognitive disconnect for the activity or actions I want to take.
Well, it's simple. It's simple, Slick. Just don't fly BVR. Only fly BFM. Then all you need is Verdac.
Some of that is the Eagle module though, because the Hornet and the Viper are very close. Yeah. They're older tapes or whatever, but they're very close to exactly. And if you have the right stick and stuff, you can actually make it almost exactly right. So I guess that's maybe part of the question or part of the answer. The other one is, if you start talking about things like pulling G's and stuff, the feel of the jet, you're just not going to have that. You can't. That's not going to be able to be replicated.
Because actually, that was Cripps' next question. How would you improve the G modeling in DCS?
Well, I think the things getting narrow is pretty good actually. Yeah. That lets you know that you're at a very high G regime, but it's not. You don't automatically do that just because you hit 8.5. So I don't know how you would.
Yeah. That one kind of annoys me sometimes because I'll be it'll some of the servers things will start to go dark and I'll just be like, no, I'm not that out of shape.
They need to model it so if you're hungry when you flew, then right. Or if you've had a fight with your wife that morning, or if you're you put some weight on in recent months.
Yeah, you could do some CRM before you load into the. You could actually do that.
Do some check boxes.
You could model it for the length of time the fight's been going on.
Yeah.
You've been under G. You've been under G for a minute, and now the next time you pull 8.5, you have less time before it does that. I mean,
funny you mentioned that's a BMS thing. I think AS was saying the BMS F-16 pilot models that. Yeah. So if you first couple of turns you're good, and then after that, next few revolutions you start to suck a bit with the G.
Yeah.
The one they'll make you do, like when you go through the centrifuge, the longest, toughest profile is the ACM profile, and that lasts about 2 minutes. And and that's what the expectation is, that you can be going up. You can start at like 8.5 down to 4 and up and down, and last about 2 minutes is the kind of the standard physiological expectation.
Yep. Next question. Is there another jet in either Eastern or Western militaries that you wish you could have had the chance to pilot?
We were talking about this on the break. I actually, for about 48 hours, I had gotten an assignment to go fly MiGs in Germany on that program. But before I could actually get through the system, they canceled it because the MiGs were going away. But that's close as I ever came.
MiG-29, you mean? Or
I'm sorry?
Which MiG, sorry? MiG-29?
Yeah, the 29. It was the exchange program that Guido mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
If I could fly any jet, what would it be? I think it would be cool to fly a Su-27.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
It would be cool. One of the versions of the Su-20, not the ground attack one.
So if you had the choice between a flanker and an F-22, you go the flanker still?
Well, what's the question? Am I going to be an F-22 pilot in the USAF? I think I'd probably take that. Am I just going to be able to fly it once? I think I'd take the Su-27.
Oh man.
That would be awesome. But flying a Raptor would be cool too. I mean, that would be something.
All right, so Gordo B had a great chat at Avalon Business Day with Kadena Patchwearer back on 01. He'd been in Southern Watch and had fun against an Iraqi MiG-25. The Foxbat was making a run on the E3, Mark 3 Plus at flight level 70. He was Mark 2 Plus at flight level 50.
That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. That's the exact same time frame, roughly, and the same. I wonder who that is, because it sounds like my engagement, actually. I had a couple wingmen with me when that happened. So
were you talking to Gordo B? Were you talking to Guido?
Yeah, it wasn't me. I don't know what Avalon Business Day is, and I'm not the only guy who ran an intercept on a 25. So, but I was out of Kadena at the time. That was about the right time, as I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know his name, I'm sure we know him. From 01, we have to know who he is.
Now listen, we've thrown loads of questions at you guys today. Do you have any questions?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's mostly like about the gaming community, and I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. Like,
I'm kind of curious. Sorry, I'm always kind of curious, like what people want to see. So we talked earlier. We don't need to go back on the 1212 gaming thing, but like, what things are folks missing that they want, like that maybe we could kind of like, test out some of our theories on, like, I made that little thing for how to interpret a B scope. Are there things we could do? Somebody put a link on, somebody else had built a site on understanding the how radar cones work.
So you're talking about like a third party mobile app or something that could.
I mean, I mentioned to you the other day, like maybe doing a BFM briefing and putting it where folks in DCS could review it. I said there's lots of tutorials online about DCS specifically.
Yeah,
I was curious if things like that would be useful, if Guido and I could do something like that.
Well, Pilgrims has just said interaction chats, and I think what he's getting at, correct me if I'm wrong, Pilgrims, but you want to see these guys on stream more? Because we can organize that. In fact, we were talking about having a session maybe once a fortnight where we do fighter pilots react to, and what we do is we go and get a bunch of content from DCS and around the internet and just have these guys react to it,
That'd be hilarious, man. Yeah.
Is that something you guys would watch?
One thing we always said in our community is everything's a debrief.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always on each other's cases. If someone does something wrong, it doesn't matter whether it was flying or admin or just in life. You're always debriefing your buddy on what he effed up. Usually kidding wise, but sometimes serious. Depending on what it is that they did.
You do have to temper that with your wife, though.
What's that?
You have to temper that with your wife and not like debrief yourself.
They don't like that at all.
All right, here's an interesting one to throw at you guys. So a few guys there in chat have said timeline BVR brief or a BVR debrief from TACView. And actually, you know what? I would be interested in that as well. But can we do it without you guys landing yourselves in hot water?
I can talk generalities on it, but I don't know if that's going to be interesting enough, because probably everything I say is going to be something they already kind of know about what they're doing.
Yeah.
I would love to. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could teach, but there's so much of it that's still classified.
Relevant, yeah.
What's interesting is for us, and for me especially, because I'm still current, not for Slick as much, you can go on the internet and find all kinds of stuff. And some of it, for me, is still classified, even though it's out in the open. Classification, at least for the U.S. military, is on a need-to-know. They call it a need-to-know basis, which means, yes, you have a clearance for X, but just because something has a clearance of X doesn't mean you have a need to know. And it doesn't matter if you have that clearance. Are you actively doing that, or do you have a need to know? And that kind of applies to the internet. If I look on the internet and go, "Ooh, I have an X classification," it's already out there. I can't go, "Oh, I Guido declassifies this. I can talk about it." Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different because it's been so long for me. If it's out there on the internet and I'm talking about it, it's like I don't know if it's true or not, any more than the person who put it out there, because I don't have a current.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the happy medium is we debrief BFM/ACM TAC views, because you guys can talk on that, can't you?
Yeah, we can do that all day. Yeah.
That could be fun,
Yep.
especially the ACM stuff. I think if we put that up on the screen and we get in here and we have all you guys in chat and we go through maybe some of the Pilot X TAC views and we go, okay, you know, was this the right call? You know, we can walk through it step by step. I mean, hey, it might go for a couple of hours, but is that something you guys be interested in? Because we can run that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, man. If people want to throw it out there, we'll do our best, and you're going to get a lot of real world stuff thrown at it. We may say something wrong for DCS, but that's where you come in, because you can go, hey, in DCS, this is what we're trying to do, and then maybe there's something to be learned from both sides on that.
All right. Well, what we could do is we could run the Pilot X comp, and then maybe the next weekend we could run a debrief session. But I mean, we need to talk about the timing, so it's kind of relevant for people, but and works for you guys. But I don't know. Backing it onto the Pilot X flight might drag things out a bit. The Pilot X comp. I mean, like if we did Pilot X and then we did a debrief after, I think that'd be too long. But maybe we just come back with some highlights out of that whole thing and put some points.
I know
down
Slick and I are planning on doing some more virtual BFM things, like I put up on my channel a while back, and aiming it more at the real world thing on what it looks like and what it sounds like and how we would debrief it. And that's going to help us further understand DCS and how it flies and what the real differences are. I'm starting to get a better idea, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know exactly how DCS flies and how exactly it's different.
Yeah, but you got to be careful, because DCS would become like a second job for you guys.
Yeah. There is that, man. Unlimited time is not a thing, and no one in chat has that either.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, look, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's wrap it up. Huge shout out to you for coming in here, being super humble and helpful, and just gaming with us. It's awesome having you guys on board, and we're excited about where things are going. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone in chat for joining me, and Guido and Slick, and thanks to my sponsor, Wild Weasel. It's good times all around. Great time to be part of DCS and the combat simming communities. So cheers, dudes.
Thanks, man.
Really appreciate the welcome.